Hello, everyone. I'm Captain Logan, and joining me this evening is Connor Nielsen. Hello, Connor.
Hello, Captain Logan. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I want to say thank you very much for watching an entire season of television with 1 week's notice. Connor and I have been talking about doing this for several weeks, and it fell through a while back for some reason. I don't even remember now, and we weren't able to get schedules together or find time or something. And we were going to just do the first 2 episodes, do kind of a I don't want to say quick. Nothing we do on this channel is quick anymore. It's all live. But we were going to do a kind of just a sign flip thing for the first 2 episodes, like I do very often, just sampling new TV, because I don't always have time to watch a whole season of something, and I'm also not always engaged enough that I really want to keep going with the whole thing. And this, I decided, finally, since we waited as long as we did, to go ahead and take the risk and commit to watching the whole season, even though I had not seen any of it yet and didn't know if I would stay engaged and want to keep going with it. So we'll see if Connor felt like that was worth doing. I was... well, I don't want to give away anything yet about how I felt about this. But anyway, so we did go ahead and watch the whole season, or rather, and Connor, I'm glad you told me this before we started broadcasting. Just right up front, I'll say this is an 11 episode season. It's Neil Gaiman's Sandman's what we're talking about. Very strange that 10 episodes drop like a season, and then a couple weeks later we get one more episode. It's like an extra bonus thing. Almost like, the series got canceled and then it goes on DVD and Blu-ray, and then it gets like the one episode that they didn't bother to air because Fox showed it out of order, and then it got canceled before they could give it that last episode. Like Firefly and The Tick in the same year. But I digress. That's what this kind of felt like. So Connor didn't get around to the 11th episode. He only gave himself enough time for 10. But he needed 11,
I'm really slacking, guys. I don't go up to 11. I'm so sorry, guys.
And I did it, man. I'm hardcore. I got it all the way to 11.
This is why you're the captain, all right?
That's, you know what, though? That's not fair, because there have been at least a few times, particularly in comic vaults, where there will be one or two extra issues that I was supposed to look at that I didn't realize, and then the other person that I'm talking to did all the homework, but I didn't. So I've been on the other side of this before. I'll talk a little bit about that last episode later on, when and if it comes up. But anyway, we're going to do what we usually do here, and do a how we felt about, give you our best thing, worst thing, overall kind of take with this. Do we recommend it? Do we want to see more? Are we excited about a second season if that gets greenlit? It hasn't yet, which is something of a surprise. Netflix has not yet said for sure if this is getting another season or not. It sounds like it's very 50-50. It could keep going. It could get shut down. I'm sure a lot of that has to do with just Netflix's money woes right now. Can they even afford to do another season? Because this apparently has been pretty well watched. So if it doesn't get another season, it has nothing to do with viewership.
And it's also in partnership with Warner Brothers Television, which I don't know, considering with Zaslav and where that's all with money woes and whatnot. I would also be very curious to know what a second season looks like.
That's a good point, yeah. If they have to do any of the bankrolling for this, and it's not all just Netflix, because I don't know how all that works, of course. They've only got apparently enough money to put out 2 more major movies this year, and that was information we had like a month ago. So like 3 months left in the year or more, they could only put out 2 movies. So yeah, there's a lot of things going against this getting more seasons that have nothing to do with whether or not people care. Because again, apparently it's been popular enough. Up against some of their other shows that get a lot of views and a lot of, I guess, watch hours is the new thing with streaming. That's how you know you've got good viewership is how many hours have been watched, not how many clicks you get or how many people are tuning in, because you can't tell that anymore with households and stuff.
Right.
But anyway, so why don't we go ahead and just get right into it. Connor, I've been talking a while already. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the structure of this show, if you would, and real super brief synopsis if you want to. Real quick, let me say, Austin and I wish he was able to make it tonight. He didn't have time to watch this with us, but he and I reviewed the first trade of Sandman, which is about half the season in Adaptation. So I had this kind of rare, and I guess you did too, right? Is that all you've read?
I actually read a little bit of the second volume too.
Okay, cool.
You guys had talked about that before I had finished reading that first trade, and when I was looking at the list of episodes, I noticed that this goes beyond the first trade. And so I didn't quite finish the second trade. So there is a point where I am privy to all of what's going on, and then I'm not. I think that might be the case with you too.
It absolutely is. And for me, it's almost the halfway point. Really, up through episode 6, I know everything that's being adapted. Well, halfway through episode 6, which was a really kind of, again, I don't want to get ahead of myself, that was kind of a cool experience, to like get almost verbatim a story that I'd read in a comic, and then another story I knew nothing about that was thematically and character-wise very related to the first, and we made one story out of it, kind of, and that, that was really an interesting experience. I was going to say, I had the rare opportunity for me to get to watch a thing that was adapting material I was familiar with, but then also I got to be surprised by story without it going a completely different way. You know what I mean? Where like half of it is pretty much more or less adapted, especially just the major plot points, like the character motivations and just the major stuff that happens up through the first half of the season. It's pretty much that first trade. What is it? What is that called again? Prologue?
Preludes and Nocturnes.
Preludes and Nocturnes, that's what it is. And then I got to get into a more serialized kind of epic story that I was not familiar with at all. So that was fun. I got to kind of have my cake and eat it too a little bit. But yeah, so would you give us just a real brief rundown of the structure of this and what it's about?
Yeah, this might sound familiar to you if you are read up on Neil Gaiman's The Sandman, sometime early in the 20th century. A Roderick Burgess, a leader of an occult mystery society, traps and captures the Lord of Dreams, Morpheus, beneath his castle in London for some 80 to 100 years. And while he is gone, the dreaming, the kingdom of dreams and the subconscious and all of that has been sent into disarray. And once the Sandman returns, he is on a quest to reclaim his stolen goods and also to restore his kingdom. And that looks different in the other realms than it does on Earth, but they are, of course, all related. He meets a lot of characters and learns a little bit about humanity, and humanity learns a little bit from the Sandman. So that's probably the best way I would describe this show as a premise.
Yeah, and that's and what you're describing is very much what the first half is about, and then, like I said, there's much more of a kind of comic booky, like, you know, I don't want to say straight up superhero, but closer to that kind of vein, you know, end of reality scenario with the back half. So like the first 6 episodes, each one is kind of standalone, but obviously pushing forward our overarching narrative and kind of getting Sandman his mojo back, which, again, I've talked about already with the comics, and I'm not going to get too hip deep into, and of course, with how we felt about it, I don't usually too much anyway, but into like analysis and stuff of all of that, because, again, it's all more or less there, and I've talked about all that already. And then it becomes very serialized in the back half. From 7 on, it's not, the episodes are not as standalone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, and from what I've read of the second trade, it is more or less adapting those issues. However, the adaptation is looser. And there is, I think, I can't remember if we've talked about this yet, but every issue is more or less getting adapted. There is one that is just straight up not adapted at all. And there are like things about the payoff in the final episode of this season that I recognize because I read the issue that was not even adapted. And so
that's so weird.
It's
kind of the Harry Potter problem.
I guess, yeah, because it's the first issue of the second trade, which is the Doll's House Prelude. And plot-wise, it has nothing to do with the rest of what's going on. And I get why they didn't probably adapt that. They might adapt it later. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. But the adaptation is much looser in terms of the characters and events and how it's all kind of getting moved around, which characters are at which location, who they kind of... For example, the Dream Vortex girl, her friend that she is traveling around with... Yeah, Rose. Her friend, like, not Lydia, but it's something like Lydia.
Lyda?
Lyda, yeah. That character is, like, not accompanying her at all. That's a character in that, but it's in a different she's accompanying a different character. So there's stuff like that where it's like they are adapting that stuff, but it's switched around a little bit more than it was in the first half.
Yeah, and like I don't want to spend the entire time, of course, comparing this to the source material as always, but it is harder to not do that here, and we have to do some of that because it's so much more directly adapted than a lot of things. And what you just described is usually more of how we do things, but the that first trade and how it's adapted is a lot more straight than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think as a work of adaptation, that's how I'm approaching this from. Typically, when I watch a comic book movie or a movie based on a book, I'm not familiar with it, and so I think it's just sort of inevitable that we're gonna run into that. So apologies if people don't like listening to that. But in the case of like Dune, I was familiar with that book. In the case of Invincible, I familiarized myself with that source material. And this is the Sandman. Like they teach this stuff in college. I want to be familiar with that material before I watch this show. So
well, and you can't like unknow and unsee what you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's impossible, and it would be kind of a pointless exercise to come into a thing like this and try to forget everything you know and pretend like you hadn't read the material and like you don't have feelings about how it's adapted. Mm-hmm. This is also very much in that Watchmen territory of people thought it was unfilmable.
Right.
This was believed to be a thing that was an ill-advised exercise. You probably shouldn't try to adapt this. It's too much of a comic book, and the structure, like it's too much. It's less about the medium than arguably Watchmen is, maybe at least what I've read of it. Although that's probably not even fair. I bet the more you read of that, the more it also probably feels like it's kind of about comic books. But I don't know. But like, I feel like. This is a lot like Watchmen in that you read that book and you're like, well, how in the world would you adapt that? And then you get an adaptation of it. And if you're like me, a big Watchmen fan who does like that movie, and I know a lot of people don't, I still think of it as kind of unadaptable. You know what I mean? Like I like the attempt. I like what we did with it. I'm kind of in the same place with Sandman, I think, where it's like, yeah, this is an attempt, and it's an interesting attempt, and we'll talk about whether or not we think it's or like how effective it is, but it still feels kind of unfilmable to me, like especially structurally. What are you gonna do? I'm glad we got this instead of a movie, which was in development hell and a lot of different versions and plans and things going all the way back to 1989. You can't do this in 2 or 3 hours, or even 4. That's a mistake. Yeah. And if you tried. And you did it straight, you'd actually, I'm glad you brought up Dune, because you'd be in a Dune place. You couldn't adapt enough of it for a movie to begin to stand on its own. You would be sitting in, and I like that movie, but like, it can't get to, because I'm not a Dune guy, but like my wife and a lot of other fans of that were like, almost in an X-Men place, right? Like with that first movie, this is good. I'm too anxious to get to the next part. It can't adapt as much of it as I want it to, but it's good because it doesn't try to do too much of it. That's what you'd have if you try to do Sandman. You couldn't do more than the first 3 or 4 issues in a movie, and it would almost look like you weren't even looking at a story if you did that, right? Like it would just look like establishing the character. Okay, he gets kidnapped. He's stuck in an hourglass for 100 years, or in this case a little longer, so we can get to 2021, and then he gets out, and maybe he gets his 3 pieces of iconography, his his tools, and that'd be about it. Like that's as much as you can possibly do in a movie.
I remember like this was like conceived of as like a movie project as recently as the early 2010s when Joseph Gordon-Levitt was brought on as Sandman. Like, and
he was supposed to maybe direct it. He was producing it. Like, it was going to be his baby along with Gaiman.
His name is nowhere to be found on the credits for this. And the reason I think that's actually just kind of worth bringing up is just because he's not involved now, is the way these kinds of things, and I'm just explaining this to the audience, but in case people don't know, like, when you have a lot of this project that is going through development, that development just doesn't go up in flames. A lot of that development just stays, and whoever comes in next looks at it, probably takes what is there, looks through it, sees what they want to keep, gets rid of the stuff they don't. And like in the case of like Batman versus Superman, the Batman versus Superman project was around for a very, very long time. And when we got Zack Snyder's Batman versus Superman, he's taking a lot of that stuff that was in that development process over the last several decades, and does adapt it. He does bring it to the screen. And in the case of the Sandman, I would have expected maybe some of the stuff that Joseph Gordon-Levitt had his fingers in maybe stuck around. I guess it didn't, but I don't know. There are a few things here and there that does feel like I can see it as the movie, but I can see where it becomes a TV show.
And it's hard to say because, movies to TV are so different, and I would imagine, I wouldn't be surprised to find that they did start completely from scratch and threw those scripts away and didn't look at them, especially because after Levitt, there was a TV attempt even before this that was supposed to maybe go to HBO.
I do remember that news story, yeah. It'll be wild if this never gets a second season because, between this and Y the Last Man spending forever in development and they get one season and that's all we got. Like, you spent how many years waiting and hearing news about it and then nope, that's all you get.
And that's really sad. But on the other hand, you know what the big difference is? People are watching this.
That's
and liking this, and that did not happen with Y. And I got 3 episodes in that, and I had to turn it off. I thought the pilot was okay, and after that, I was out.
Dude, I didn't even know why The Last Man was airing until after the first 3 episodes aired.
Yeah, you heard about this. Sandman's been everywhere. I heard about this.
They at least got the word out. With Y, I had no idea. There was that Disney Investors Day thing where they're like, "Oh, this is happening," and then the next news I heard was months later where they said, "Oh yeah, it's been out." It has? What? Okay.
Okay.
Anyways.
So you want to hear something funny? There was almost a Sandman movie in 1996. Do you know about this?
No.
Okay, so there was almost a Sandman movie in 1996, and the name of the let's see, the guy that was supposed to direct that was Roger Avery, which is not a name that immediately I recognize. Who is that?
That is Quentin Tarantino's good friend who helped co-write Pulp Fiction.
Rules of Attraction. Okay, so that's who was supposed to make that. And now that you say that with that credit, that's an interesting choice, right? So, so that's who was supposed to direct it. And guess why he left and the movie project fell apart? I bet you can guess. It's 1996. It's Warner Brothers. What do you think happened?
Oh no! Just tell me. Tell me.
Oh, I thought you were gonna get it. I thought you were gonna come right out.
It's on the tip of my tongue.
Creative differences with Jon Peters.
I was gonna say creative differences, but when you said it's 96, I was thinking was there another project that just came out where they're
there was another project that was about to be worked on where the same freaking thing happened. It's called Superman Lives. It was Jon Peters.
Yeah.
I wonder if you wanted a giant spider in Sandman.
Hey, there are those sisters. They got the taxidermy spiders, all right? Let's put a giant one of those in, okay?
Darth Bobo says they wanted Nick Cage, and if we're talking about this particular project, that's really funny. If Sandman fell through, and they were thinking, this would tell us stuff about Superman Lives that even the guy that made that documentary maybe doesn't know. Or maybe didn't know. Sorry, he passed away. But that I finally just watched through that whole thing. I'd seen part of it, and last week I finished that. I watched that whole movie. Everybody should watch Death of Superman Lives, by the way. It's wonderful.
I should.
But they don't talk about Sandman and Nick Cage in that. If Nick Cage was almost Sandman, that'd be crazy.
Oh man. Just quick aside. There's a movie called
and then we'll totally review the show. I promise you.
Look we're buddies. We're catching up. Thanks for being here. But there's this movie that came out last year called Licorice Pizza, and it takes place. I thought it was really good. And there's a whole extended bit where Bradley Cooper is playing Jon Peters, and it's one of the funniest.
What?
It is so funny. This is during the time where he's dating Barbara Streisand, and he is the biggest jerk in the world. He's such it's
well, some of the stories you've heard about him,
dude. I can't he's still alive. I don't know how they got away with this. It's crazy how bad they treat him, but it's funny. It's really, really funny. Anyways,
if any one story I've heard about him is true, I'm sorry. I can't help but think he kind of deserves it.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be like that, but just look into Jon Peters, because if any of the crazy stories and I don't even want to say rumors because there's so much corroboration. There's just
Yeah,
like the way he would humiliate people and stuff. Like
he
anyway.
Bradley Cooper got nominated for awards, and he's only on screen for like 10 minutes. Like, he's so funny in that movie. Anyways,
for doing John Peters.
For doing John Peters, and he's really good. Anyways, Cap, what did you think of? How did you feel about the Sandman?
Oh man, I was gonna make you start. Okay, I'll start.
Gotcha.
Sandman was a very strange experience to me. I liked the pilot quite a bit, or the first episode. I don't know if Netflix does pilots, but anyway, it was a pretty good introduction to everything, I thought. And my initial criticism right out the gate was just simply, and I think I'm spoiled by Invincible. It's like, this whole thing should be animated. Like, why can't we just do an animated Sandman? Like, you wouldn't have to worry about production values. You wouldn't have to worry about weird green screen. You wouldn't have to worry about like inconsistent effects and stuff. Just animate it straight. Like, why can't we be Japan at this point? Why can't we just make animes of all the really great classic comics? Like the things that are like unfilmable, unadaptable, a little less so in animation, maybe. Like could we just animate it? And I will say that by the end of the show, I felt a little bit less that way. Like, there are performances and things that I enjoyed enough that I was glad to see this in live action. And I will say it's ambitious and, like, it's expensive, but it's still only $15 million an episode, and it's the kind of project where it feels like you're kind of doing a big movie every time you make an episode. And so that doesn't sound like a lot to work with as much special effects you've got to deal with, and like entire broad sweeping like areas that you have to build in a computer from the ground up, like hell and like the dream world and the dreaming and all of that. So I'll say just real quick, and then I'll do a best thing, worst thing. I don't think I would probably appreciate this as much as I did by the end if I didn't know some of the source material first. I also don't know that I would say I don't recommend this unless you read the material first, because since I do know the material, it's hard to say if it would like keep my attention or not. There are things that I didn't quite totally grasp in the book that I did feel like the show made a little bit clearer in places. So that was nice. There's some places where it kind of, and I don't think overly so, where it just sort of simplifies ideas a little bit and says, this is what some of this stuff is about, particularly thematically. And again, I don't think it holds your hand too much. I think it's just more focused, just a little clearer. It just brings it out to the fore more. Where it goes, this is about an arrogant god who is finding humanity or learning how to be human. It makes that a lot clearer a lot earlier, which makes me more invested in him as a character, I think, as I'm going through. I think I'm more walled off from him in the book from the beginning. But then there's other places where it's not focused where it should be and kind of loses me a little bit. Like, for example, I don't think there's anything like enough dream imagery and dream scenes until the back half. So like the whole thing is about the dream world and a dream god, and it's curious how few dream sequences there are when every other show in the universe relies too much on them. It's like, that's kind of weird, right?
Yeah, no, that's a fair point.
Yeah, and then you have things like in the book, it opens with, here's how dream being out of the world for 90 or 100 years is affecting individual people and the world at large. And I thought that reading the comic, it was bogged down in that so much, I didn't have a central character. I was having a hard time appreciating it until a second read, and then I really loved that stuff and felt like I had to have it. That is nowhere at the beginning of the show. And so when you get to the second half, and we're finally dealing with a couple of major characters, one in particular, who's the great-grandmother of Rose, who was had the what the book calls the sleepy sickness, and I guess in 2021, 2022, we're too good for sleepy, so we got to do like the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers thing. It can't be morphin anymore now; it's gonna be morphing. So the sleeping sickness. Anyway, we finally have a character who's been unconscious for all this time, and I'm like, okay, like I didn't have a good enough sense of how the rest of the world was affected before that. So like sometimes we're not focusing on the right stuff. But anyway, I think the second half is stronger than the first, and if I wasn't watching this for review, I actually think it might have lost me by the third episode, and I might have jumped ship. With the Joanna Constantine episode, which is okay, but it just the whole show wasn't grabbing me as much as I thought it was going to after that first episode. And later on, we'll talk about some just individual superficial things that took me out and taste issues where I'm like, I don't know if I care enough to keep watching the show. I can just read the comics. Like I kept having that. I was quite invested after the sixth episode, which I thought was almost perfect and kind of brilliant, and I was really I was really in love with just, it's just Neil Gaiman straight up, and we're not bothering to change anything. And so like I don't know how much of the show I want to give credit for those for the stories in that episode over Gaiman, but like it's really well executed. I love performances in that. We'll talk about it. The like, meeting the guy every 100 years and all of that, it spoke to me. It was wonderful. I loved it. And after that, I was really, really with it. So anyway, the best thing about this show, I kind of just want to say, is that episode. But I think I'm gonna... See, I want to say, like, I don't know, just that it's willing to adapt this as straight as it is. But maybe I'll give it to the guy playing Dream, because he's so off the page. And, like, I really, really like him. And some people might not care for his performance and might feel like he's too, I don't know, emo-y or something. But, like, I don't know. That's how he felt to me in the comics. Like, I really, really liked his performance. Worst thing is, let me think. I should have decided where I was going to go with this beforehand, because it's maybe a tie, and this is, some people are going to be like, you're a prude, this kind of thing doesn't bother me. I have language issues in places with this show. I don't think we should have F-bombs in 1926. I just don't. Like I had a really tough time with that. And some of that was some of the things that took me out, that made me kind of want to stop watching the show too early. You'll have whole episodes that don't feel the need to go there, and then other places where it seems like we'll ramp up language. I don't even want to say violence so much. I think that's okay. But in some places, we'll ramp up language to a melodramatic degree, almost like somehow people will take it more seriously if we do that. And that kind of took me out. And then tied with that is just certain casting choices. And it's so weird to say. I think casting is one of the bigger issues with this show, but not overall. It's like, it's not even like a half and half thing, but like some of the performances or choices for actors, I should say, it took me out enough that, again, early on, I might have quit watching. So I don't know. I very rarely throw casting at a show or a movie, but I'm doing that here. But I am flipping green, and I do want more of the show, and I was quite invested with it by the end. But the main thing it made me want to do was just sit down and read the rest of the comic series. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. I talked too long. You got the floor, Connor.
I want to listen to you talk more, because I don't know what to make of this show. That's where I'm at.
Oh, and you told me that just a few episodes in. I thought it might win you over toward the end.
It hasn't really won me one direction or the other. Like I'm kind of split, and to the degree where I have no idea what way I flip. Maybe by the end of the episode, after we talk, we can, I'll arrive at a conclusion. But
yeah, sure.
I don't know. And part of it's like, I'm not a TV guy, and so like maybe I don't know how to quite articulate some of the stuff. But the other thing about this is that it's so uncannily in between a movie and a TV show that like I couldn't quite figure this thing out.
Well, what do you think of what I said earlier? Because I didn't really give you a chance to respond to that. Do you want this as a movie instead? Because I feel like this is the only way to do it, really.
No, well, see, that's the thing, is like, I want it as a movie, but there's like 15 asterisks next to that, right? And I want it as a show, but now I have it as a show where I feel like I can see like 5 things wrong with this that are pretty big. But there's also like 5 other big things about this that work because it is a TV show. And so like that's where I'm at with it, where you could adapt it into a film in a certain way where it's like Blade Runner, where it's very mood and tone and idea driven, and like the characters are just sort of like mouthpieces for concepts, and like the plot is very simple and procedural, and you could do it that way. But then it could be argued you're not properly adapting the comic.
The
And
problem is you're adapting a thing that's too beloved, and then I go,
yes,
should we adapt things that are this beloved then? If people like think it's too much of a comic book, like
yeah. So my and I don't know, like so it's like I don't really have a best thing. I have like 5 things I like about this show a lot. And I don't really have a worst thing. I have 5 things about it so I have to like pick one of these because you already took like superficial um differences like in terms of like throwing out f-bombs and language and that kind of stuff like that. I had that issue too. Since you used that, I don't think I'll go with that one. I'll say my best thing about this is you already said the 6th episode. Okay.
it's so good though.
It it's really good. I think that the I'll say specifically certain casting choices are great. I think Gwendolyn Christie as Lucifer is awesome. That is a very good off the page casting that is also thoughtful. It reminded me a lot of Tilda Swinton as Michael in Constantine movie in a lot of ways.
That was one of the reasons I said worst. I said casting is the worst thing. I didn't like her at all.
Okay, and I get why you're saying that. And this will get into a very interesting thing because I also have problems with direction here a lot. But I did really like David Thewlis as Dr. Destiny, who in this is called John, just John. But he's like David Thewlis, like, and he's also one of those things where it's like, I feel like when you're making a movie, he's your antagonist, and you get David Thewlis as your antagonist.
He's typecast, but he's the right guy for it.
Yeah. Like ever since the 90s, he was in a movie called Naked, directed by Mike Lee, where he's just a crazy man. And ever since then, we got him as Lupin, we got him as Ares.
I was going to say, if you ever paid attention to that actor before the Harry Potter movies, you wouldn't have to read the Harry Potter books to know that he was going to be a werewolf. Like,
yeah, and speaking of Harry Potter, I think it was really smart that they got Gary Oldman as Sirius Black because, you know, nowadays he's always cast as a good guy, but before then, no, he was
really typecast. Yeah, Batman Begins changed all of that for him, I think.
Exactly. I think you're right, yeah. Anyways, but I do like a lot of the casting here, mostly in places, and I do think a lot of the casting is let down by direction. We can get into Constantine later. I think the woman they have to play her is very good. And I think that...
I don't like what they give her to say.
Yeah, but I do, like, I can see that she is trying to do John Constantine. I don't like the way they dress her up. I don't like the way... Yeah, I don't like necessarily what they have her say. I don't like the way they dress her up. I don't like the way they... Like, I just think she's probably the wrong person to be cast, but I think she's doing a good job. So
I have that with other things, too, yeah.
Yeah, so... and I think the fellow who they have playing... Dream is quite good. He does have a total, like...
I thought we might argue on that. I didn't know if you'd like him, and I bet people are going to be... People in the comments are saying he's too pretty to be Dream. I guess I can see why you're saying that.
Yeah, no, I can see that. He has a British Joseph Gordon-Levitt thing going on, 100%. But
Tom Sturridge is his name, and I've never seen him in anything.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I have either. I think he's quite good, and I think mostly that's due to his... what he's doing physically, you know, how he doesn't move, how he does move. His voice, I think, is quite good. It's not the voice I have in my head when I read the comic, but it's definitely a take that he is going for, and I think he sticks with it. So that's, I think, best thing. And I think generally the show looks excellent.
Oh, do you? I really wonder where you'd be on that.
But like when we go to Hell and we see Lucifer's castle, like that looks like it's out of a movie. It looks amazing.
Well, and I like your take on the dreaming. I like once Morpheus gets his castle back together, it looks so cool.
It does. Even though like you can see some scenes have probably less of a budget than others, they're understanding of their limitations and they're not getting too ambitious, but they know they have the proper money. There's a smart use of money. There's a nightmare who wants to be a dream, and I think she looks really good for a television show. And I think the one place where it does look a little uncanny... She's got kind of like a galaxy inside of her that's swirling around. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
When she's pretending to be like the man in the chair for the kid that's being a superhero and like he's being Sandman.
Yes. Yeah, she looks really cool. It's not until the last episode where she's standing on a green screen where it doesn't look good. And that's where it's like, okay, but when Dream is standing on a green screen, all of a sudden it looks kind of cool. I don't know, like it's I don't know, like I feel like I'm not being very specific with this best thing, and that's
Well, one
because
thing
I'm
I
not.
was impressed with, real quick, since we're there, because we may not talk about effects enough,
Uh-huh.
is their use of depth with green screen. This is my issue a lot with Marvel movies. We're talking about big screen projects where there's no excuse, right?
Mhm.
Where you'll have a person that we're not making anything look like it's further in the foreground versus the background, so you can tell it's just a person's head standing in front of a screen with a picture behind them. And in this, we're careful about depth. We put things enough. We've got enough forced perspective that you really can't tell that the person isn't actually there.
And I don't know if they did like one of those kinds of green screen or volume set things for when they're driving in a car, but like I don't know if you looked out the window when they're talking, but it looks like they have like a lower frame rate for like the what's happening outside the car, and it looks really cool. Kind of disorienting. I honestly kind of wish there was more disorienting imagery and direction because we're dealing with dreams, but that kind of stuff
What
was
scene
really cool.
specifically are you talking about?
It's when Stephen Fry and Rose are in the car together and they're driving around, and it'll just do like shot reverse shot. I don't know if they're like actually in a car, or it seemed to me that they might be just on like a set.
I didn't notice the
Uh,
lower frame rate. If I look at this again, I'll pay attention to that.
that's what it maybe looked like to me, but it's just the outside, like you know, like
That's interesting. Yeah.
the passing trees looked really cool.
Speaking of
Anyways,
casting, though, Fry is awesome
oh
in
yes,
this.
and I also want to shout out John Cameron Mitchell, who plays the drag queen landlord. I think he's very very good too. He's a filmmaker and actor who's probably most famous for Hedwig and the Angry Inch, but I
Oh,
did not
interesting.
expect to see him show
I
up.
liked his
So
performance fine. Yeah.
yeah. Anyways, my least favorite thing here. This is where that's actually the reason I just brought up the production here is all because my least favorite thing about this is also tied to production, and it's like it's wrestling. You know what I mean? Like I don't have one specific thing that's entirely bad, but I think in terms of preference, in terms of how I'm feeling while I'm watching it, when you adapt something, when anything adapts anything, what I want is not just that thing on the screen. If I want Neil Gaiman's Sandman, I will read Neil Gaiman's
It's
Sandman.
the
I don't need
animated Batman year one problem.
yes, and this is not this lacks a stylistic distinction. It's I would describe this as stylistically indistinct, and a lot of that's probably just because it's television. You know, you have a handful of directors who all need to have a unified way of doing things. You know, you have your writers and your special effects artists and all these people just trying to get on the same page. And when you have all these people trying to get on the same page, no one voice can really go forward. And that's the way television works, and I respect that's how it works. But when it's something like this and it's an adaptation, it does feel like I might as well just be reading the comics. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of where I'm at with it.
I
And
think I was
so
wrestling with that a little bit too. Yeah.
when you get to the first half, I'm
Then it
like,
feels
why?
like almost supplemental material before it feels like a thing that stands on its own. Where it's like, if you
Mhm.
know the material, it's fun to see it adapted, but then it's an exercise before it's a piece of art that stands on its own.
Yes, and I'm
You
glad
can
we're
go
talking
too
about
far in either direction, right? You can turn it too much
yes.
into something that has nothing to do with the source material, so then it might as well be called something else, or you can do that. I don't think that's as bad as you're saying, but I get where you're coming from, certainly.
Yeah, I like you know, obviously in my head I'm thinking like if someone gave me Sandman and they gave me like the first couple of trades and said, Connor, adapt this, I would look at Sam Keith's art and I would look at Mike Dringenberg's art, and I would look at what they're doing, and I would be like, okay, they're trying to harken back to horror comics from like the 80s, or like I guess horror comics of its time and maybe earlier, right? And I would say, okay, let's make a movie that looks like The Howling. Let's get a horror movie, like let's make this Sandman movie look like an 80s horror movie. Let's make it look like something like An American Werewolf in London. You know what I mean? Like go for something like a Joe Dante or whatever. And that doesn't mean I wish this show looked like that. But what I'm saying is, if a Guillermo del Toro did this, it would look a very different way. It would look awesome. right? But honestly, it really hit me when I was watching the back half. Mike Flanagan should have made this show. He made The Haunting of Hill House. He made Doctor Sleep. He's been making a lot of horror movies and TV shows for Netflix a lot too, and this is right up his alley. The budget is up his alley. The kind of subject matter, its balance of drama and human and familial relationships with horror and all kinds of different horror, supernatural horror, serial killer horror, like all that kind of stuff. I really would have liked to do that, and his cinematic language is also very efficient. He definitely is aware of his limitations as a filmmaker. He does television and films, and I think he bridges the gap in a very tasteful way. And so I guess that's kind of the way in terms of how I would like to have seen this adapted maybe better, is if someone like a Mike Flanagan took this, because I can see what that would look like. As is, it's very polished, it's very handsome. I never disliked looking at this show, but it lacks a personality of its own, and I think that's my biggest.
And I can't even say not stylistic, not stylized. Right?
That's
like,
yeah.
Like it is. It doesn't feel like, because we've had this problem with other comic adaptations where it's too heightened of an idea and too not real worldy, but it looks too much like everything else on television, and like it's set too much in the real world. This show doesn't have that problem. I do think one thing that might have solved that issue for you a little bit would just be if there was more of a distinction between talking about stylization between the what's filmed in the dream world and what's filmed in the real world. That should maybe have more of its own look, because certainly it does, in the sense of, like, all the weird, like, architecture and creatures and things, but sometimes you're in the dreaming and you don't, or at least in somebody's dream, and you don't know you're in a dream until it becomes, real clear. But then maybe that's the point too. Like, maybe you have to do that. I don't know.
Yeah, and
the comics also kind of have that.
Yeah, and like that's the comics.
And also part of what, you know what, I'm gonna disagree with myself, because I guess you can see why I'm saying that, right? But then part of the problem with doing that would be part of the point thematically is stuff that you dream is arguably sometimes as important as what happens in real life, and there's a lot of question about what should count as reality in a thing like this. And so if you sometimes can't distinguish it, like, that's part of the point.
Yeah, no, it is. And that's just sort of like, when I think about the way it's adapting it, like, that's kind of, I think, why something like The Sandman would probably be described as unfilmable, even the early stuff, is just how the kind of concoction that it is so one in a million.
You can solve this in animation.
Yeah, it's true. That
is
like,
why are we doing, and I know these are completely different studios and different sets of creators, but why are we adapting Invincible in animation and not this? That's the kind of thing that seems a lot more adaptable in live action, but we did it animated, and that's been a boon to it, I think. Why was that not a discussion with it? It seems like forever we've been trying to make live action Sandman. Why? It's so ethereal. It's so weird to look at.
Yeah, I think when you had texted me that, I hadn't had that thought. And while I watched it, it did pop into my head a few times when I was watching it. And maybe it's because I'm just like, by that point I'd seen a few episodes, and I was kind of conditioned to see it as live action. And so I was having a hard time understanding in my head how it would look animated. But, I'm not an animator, so that wouldn't be my job to do it. But as you're talking, I'm here. I can see that argument more and more. Like, I think it might have been better served for animation. But I think the reason is because, well, we live in America, baby. Animation's for kids.
Yeah, but
if this project
again, Invincible
was conceived, got made. Well, that's true, but Invincible was not in development for 20 years. So, yeah.
No, that's right.
Or 30 years, I guess. And so with this, it's like, hey, it was conceived of as for live action.
I also think
that's the way it has to be.
I also think if it had been conceived as a TV show first, now, like, there's a lot of ifs that never would have happened, but, like, if all this time nobody had thought about making a live action movie, and the idea was pitched as I don't know, like HBO Max thing or Netflix thing, maybe then you would have started at animation because you take one look at it and go, how do you even do this? But I think the problem is the idea was there for too long. This, like Watchmen, this is beloved. It makes like best of lists of literature, not just comics. There's too much money to be made, and then by the time we get it on streaming, I mean, like, it's not the same thing. It's not like huge box office returns. At this point, you're making it for arguably, well, I was going to say arguably more of a niche audience. They're clearly trying to get everybody and his dog to look at this still. But I think it would probably, again, just based on how Invincible is done, I think it'd probably be watched about as well if it was animated, if it was good.
No, you're right. And I think in terms of this era of streaming that we're in, animation has been getting more accepted beyond just adult animation by adult audiences. Like, we had that with Invincible, and there are probably 3 or 4 other shows that I could name right now that are not coming to my mind. But yeah, I think streaming has certainly helped animation too. And yeah, you're right. I just co-signed with basically everything you just said. I agree.
But that's not me saying, like, wholesale, this, adapts it totally poorly, of course, because I actually, I don't know. I meet you halfway, Connor. Like, I for whatever reason, I can't find myself going as far as to say it doesn't have its own style, but I felt like it didn't find it until the back half. Like, once it got serialized, and once we spent more time in the dreaming, I started to kind of feel and maybe part of the problem, part of the thing for me is I didn't read those issues in the comics. So, like, I got it for the first time with this show, but I started feeling like it was carving out its own tone, at least slightly up against the comics by the end of it.
I can see that. My thing with the back half is I gotta be, I didn't like the back half as much as the first half. So I guess we're kind of opposite in that way.
That's fair. I also wish it was 2 seasons. I don't know if you have that.
I do.
It should be 2 seasons. It should have come out as 6-7 episodes, and then another 5 or 6, and they could have released them 6 months or a year apart. Like, I'm quibbling over, I don't know, structural choices at some point, because if they put them out a few months apart, we still could have watched it all and reviewed it together. But you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
It's a lot altogether, and it doesn't feel like it's of one piece. It feels like it's of 2 pieces.
That's a good point, and I think that sixth episode, kind of right in the middle there, did a good job of feeling like a coda and also a setup for what was coming. And they do try to set it up with the Corinthian in early episodes. And Matthew, the Raven, is there a lot earlier than he is in the comic. And so it's like they are trying to make it look more of one piece. But once you get to the back half, I think it's...
But you still could have done all that and released a second. Now, having said that, it would have really sucked, especially to me because I like the second half more than you did, if this gets greenlit, they make 6 episodes, it gets canceled.
Yeah.
And I don't get to see the back half with the serial convention and all of that. Like, that'd be unfortunate.
Well, I think the second half does feel a little, I don't know, like, it didn't get, I feel like because it has to be all done in 4 episodes, you could have pulled 1 or 2 more episodes out of that, and I think fleshed it out a little bit more, particularly when we get to those last 2, when it's people just explaining mythology to each other while, like, CGI is going around.
There's a lot of exposition there, yeah. And so, and to be fair, I don't know how the comics handle that. That just works better on a comic page than it does on screen. Like, there's no way around it.
It is. It does, and I think...
You know what else does that? Watchmen. So, I mean, there you go.
Precisely. However, when you are conceptualizing this for television, if you can have more than 4 episodes to do that, you might be able to adapt that to a new medium in a more tasteful manner. You know, like, so
Yeah, but they're so concerned about adapting things straight off the page that I want to read those issues and see how much of just people standing around explaining things to each other happens at the end there, because sometimes it feels too afraid to take liberties.
Yes, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. And
even though it certainly does take some.
Yeah, and that's the other thing where it's like the faithfulness to the source material does work in its favor a lot of the time too, though. Like Cain and Abel are wonderful, I think. Anyways, I think
I
that
wasn't
Death.
I wasn't impressed with that.
Oh yeah,
I didn't love them. That felt reduced to comic relief to me, and like I don't know, that felt more effective in the book. I felt like you almost could have totally written them out with this show. And the thing that kept taking me out, I also expected them to come back at some point, but I mean, I guess the comics don't do that either. But again, it's just weird as a structure
well, okay.
for a season of television.
I guess I should explain what I mean. I think they are wonderfully realized on screen. I think the makeup
I don't agree with that either, but
okay.
That was so distracting to me. I seem more sensitive to this than anybody I work with on the channel.
Oh, okay.
But let me explain what my issue was with it. I had and I know what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you this, and you're going to have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm going to be the only person on the planet that has this. I just know it. But I know I'm right about it. There's this uncanny valley thing where one of them looks like his face is enhanced with CG, and the other one looks like he's just filmed, and there's no CG on his face whatsoever. And I'm looking at the other guy, and I'm going, what is the difference? And there's like no prosthetics. There's no, like, he's just a guy. He's just standing there. Why is his face enhanced with CG, and why isn't the other guy?
Oh, interesting.
I don't understand that. It drove me insane every time they're on screen together.
I didn't even realize.
See, I knew it. I knew I was going to be a lone wolf on this, but I know I'm right about it.
Okay, you might be. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's another problem.
Sorry, guys. We'll get to super chats here in just a minute.
Yeah.
We'll finish up this point. Go ahead.
Tone-wise, this is working well enough for like a supernatural television drama, but I do think the comedy is a consistent bummer. I did not find Cain and Abel funny. Like when you said like they're just kind of relegated to comic
I didn't
relief,
either, but
I would
it seemed like
agree
that's
with
what they were for.
I don't like how they adapt that. Like they want to include it, but so I wanted to make a distinction when I said I thought they were wonderfully realized on screen. They're not realized in the story very well. I guess that's what I wanted to make a distinction for, because
okay, so you're with me on that part of it.
Yes, no, they are. They are pretty much just relegated to comic relief that I did not find very funny. But I also don't find any of the comic relief in this funny either. Yeah. But except for Death. I thought Death was wonderful, and I think Desire is also very, very well cast. And all of that is right off the page.
We're going to have to talk about Death.
Oh, yeah? Let's talk about Death right now.
Well, we have to do it right now, and then we'll do... Sorry, I just want to put a pin in that, because that's a thing we got to talk about. Because, oh man... I've never been more torn on anything, I don't think, in my whole life.
Wow. Okay.
Than the Death thing. I'm so torn on it. It drives me nuts. Like, we'll talk about that whole thing. But yeah, when you were talking about comedy, let me make this point real quick, and then we'll get to super chats. When you were talking about comedy, one of the biggest problems there with the levity of the show is freaking Patton Oswalt. Like, can he just find another career, please? Because like I don't dislike Patton Oswalt. I'm sick of him. He's in everything. It's like if we need a voiceover guy for somebody that's going to be sort of snarky, and playing somebody that looks kind of weird, we always go to Patton. I'm so sick of him. I think I'm tired of him because I can always tell it's him, and. Like he just shows up in a thing and it completely takes me out. Like my kids are constantly watching that like Minecraft show that's on Netflix.
There's a Minecraft show?
The like interactive Minecraft show where they took they took a Minecraft game and they took all the cutscenes out of it, and now it's Minecraft story mode, and there's places where it stops and you like pick a direction for it to go, like choose your own adventure. And then a couple of my kids are watching that all the time, and Patton Oswalt is in that, and he's like the main character, and so you're hearing him talk for like 5 straight hours. And so the Crow shows up, and I'm like, it's just Minecraft again. We can't get rid of Patton Oswalt. He's in everything.
I
can't get away from him. And Patton Oswalt shouldn't say the F word in things.
No. Well, in Patton Oswalt, I think when he is just basically playing straight, he's actually fine as the Crow. But it's when he does have to start doing the yucks where I was like, okay, I don't need this. But it's actually funny.
He breaks
When
into like half laughter way too much. Like that's kind of his MO for like delivering, I don't know, like deadpan jokes or just times when like the character's supposed to be nervous. He goes to it so much, I started noticing it, where you just start getting, like, I'm nitpicking now, but he just starts talking and it's just everything is and he's like 4 times in a row, and I'm like, stop it, like pick something else.
I have a coworker who was talking about how, oh man, the Crow in this show is really funny, and I hadn't started watching it. It's like, it's, oh, and they got that guy to voice it. It's, like, it's not Patton Oswalt, is it? He went, it is, yeah. I'm like, oh, wow, okay.
Because of course it is.
Yeah. All right, where do you want to go with this?
Let's read these super chats, and then we'll start jumping around. So Roomski, $5 Canadian, thank you. Dream was actually my least favorite casting choice. I knew people were going to feel that way. Looks too much like a supermodel compared to the weird goth take from the comic. And we kind of talked about that a little bit. Again, I understand that. I get where you're coming from. If everybody else in the show was cast that way, it would bother me. You know what I mean? Like, it would seem like a CW choice.
Yeah, he is younger than I figured they would go, but it's, I don't know. I can see why somebody would have that, and I was also at a point I did like have a thought of, okay, this is just TV, so they have a bunch of pretty people. I was like, actually,
but they don't.
There isn't a lot of pretty.
It's
people
not a pretty people show,
yeah.
And that's kind of why I'm okay with it. And I don't mean that like they went with token pretty boy. I just think they went with somebody that actually looks weirdly kind of like the character in the comics, except he doesn't have his like weirdly angular face and stuff, but that's because he's drawn that way. I don't know, like, I just feel like if you rendered the real guy, he would look more like this than you're giving it credit for, maybe. Like,
maybe he has the world's most insane chin.
Yeah,
like that dude's jaw is next level. It's like Robert Zadar from Samurai Cop. It's like just this big chin.
But I think he's got a lot of gravitas in the role.
He does.
I think he really owns the scenes he's in. I think it's a really hard part to conceptualize. And if you feel like the show doesn't have enough of its own style or take, I don't think that's his fault. I think he's got a take. I think he's nailing that. But that's just...
And him and Boyd Holbrook, who plays the Corinthian, they both, I think, have takes on their characters, as well as, I think, the woman playing Death, that it's not as off the page as some of the other stuff is.
Oh, I think the librarian does, too.
Oh, that's another thing.
I think she's quite good.
Yes. I actually took me a couple of episodes to warm up to her. She felt a little bit like a theater actress in a movie, you know, and where, because I was like noticing how often she was blinking. All of her dialogue almost felt like it was like, you know, for the people in the back row or something. I don't know, like there was a certain way she was delivering her lines that at first she won me over, though, I will say. And again, she somehow looked really off the page, even though she doesn't have as exaggerated a features as the character from the comic.
Yeah.
They just gave her some ear stuff and, like, you know, an exaggerated suit, but it did feel off the page to a certain degree that I appreciated. But I did think that once she had more to do besides basically be Alfred, that I think I saw why she was cast, and I think she did do in the end quite an admirable performance.
And I think they do a really good job with the kind of when the relationship with her and Dream, and when they're kind of at loggerheads toward the end. I think that conflict is handled really well.
Yeah, I do too. It's not the CW take on it where they're just yelling at each other. She's aware of her position as like a servant, and she has to be passive aggressive about it. And
but like it's unusual for a character to be passive aggressive, and I'm still finding them sympathetic and understanding why they're acting that way. But the thing is, she's subservient to a god. How else is she supposed to respond to that? And so it actually kind of works, and she actually uses that to kind of turn him around a little bit. Where, like, you know, if she if she decides to do exactly what Dream is telling her to and relegate herself to the library and not keep doing the job she's been doing while he's, well, by the way, we'll just say total spoiler territory at this point. While he's been gone for 100 years, and then he doesn't even understand everything that's happening because he's been so out of the loop, then she can prove to him what her worth is, and like that's what she has to do. He is so in his own head and in his own world, and again conceited, and understandably so. Like I never lose track of him either. Like I'm never completely unsympathetic toward him. There's a thing he does toward the end, and maybe this is a Gaiman thing in the comics too, that I didn't really understand with the big kind of opportunity for change he has in the middle of the season. But other than that, I was with him even when he's acting all arrogant, which I appreciate. I'll throw that at you real quick in case we forget about it later. We're jumping around now. It's spoiler territory time. We'll just throw stuff out that we want to talk about. So, he learns from death, like he does in the comics, how to empathize more with human beings, and comes to appreciate the notion that the gods are there to serve humanity and not the other way around. When we get toward the end of the season, toward the back half of what I am thinking of as kind of season 2, and Dream finds out that Lyda, I think is her name. We mentioned that earlier, and I wasn't sure if I think that's her name. That she has been. This is such a fascinating concept. She's been impregnated in a dream, and it's carried over to real life because of the way the vortex was affecting everything. Dream says, "You conceived in a dream, so that child is mine, and someday I'll come for it." I don't understand that with where he's come to in finding more of his humanity and appreciating human beings by the middle of the season. Like at that point, he's acting like kind of a Grim Reaper type or a boogeyman type again, and I'm not sure about it.
I think that is part of what I was maybe not liking as much about the second half, is because I wouldn't be surprised if Neil Gaiman, now I have not looked at interviews with Neil Gaiman, he's probably talked about this. I'm pretty sure Doctor Who is like a big influence on the Sandman, or, for us, in America and maybe in Australia, like Mad Max, where it's like, the Sandman is a character who shows up in these stories, and it's really about these other people, and then this sort of constant, who maybe learns something along the way, but it's not really about a one, issue character arc or a one episode character arc or
That's
a
one
one
of the things
film
that makes it so
character arc.
difficult to adapt, is that sometimes he's your protagonist, and sometimes he's kind of like Spawn in that way.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's a good call.
Or Spawn is like him.
Yeah, or and I guess I've not watched a lot of Doctor Who. Apparently, that's the way it is in Doctor Who.
Sometimes, yeah, absolutely.
But with the back half of the show, this is very much Rose's show, and I think that in a lot of ways she's more likable in this show than she is in the comics that I have read so far.
Oh, interesting.
But I just, what I've read so far, I haven't really gotten much of a read on her.
I liked her fine.
Yeah, no, me too. But when we do get back to Dream, what he's like, he does have his own thing to be going on, but it's very much the B or C story of those 4 episodes. And I did feel like all that stuff, while on its own compelling, it would be like sequelitis, right? Like, it's like, I feel like I'm watching him learn the lesson I just watched him learn. And I think that is another reason.
Didn't totally learn it either.
Yeah, but that also makes it feel like a second season, because you know what I mean? Because we have this whole second character arc after he just learned it, or at least the needle was moved a little bit.
Yeah, because how many times does Oliver Queen and Arrow have to learn to not kill people? Or maybe it's okay to kill people. Or, you know what, I should quit killing people now. You know what, I'll kill this guy, but not this guy.
One thing's for sure, it's totally cool to have a private prison if you're a superhero. Anyways.
That's always fun.
Yes. However, that's what I think was working so well about that 6th episode, is that it does paint that arc as a more definitive of an arc than the rest of the show does. Where I think having the whole, like, meeting that man every 100 of years thing kind of explains why he was the way he was off the top, and then his solitude, and then his mission that he's gone on, and then hanging out with death, that's now painted this whole thing as a much more definitive, I have learned to appreciate humanity. It's felt to me more definitive than I think the rest of the show treats it.
The idea is supposed to be, I think, that Dream has an affinity for humanity and understands to some degree like his role in preserving it on the whole, but not on an individual basis. And when we get to and still thinks of himself as above them, and that sixth episode or seventh, whichever it is, I guess it is six, right? Is all about him coming to appreciate an individual.
Yes.
And like I can make one of these people my friend, and I guess that makes me also in turn a person. And maybe he had to be a victim for 100 years to get to that place. Because he doesn't even know who he is anymore and what to do with himself, even after he's gotten 100% of his power back. That's one of the things I love about that issue in the comics, is he gets his bag of sand and his helm and his ruby back. And we spend all this time doing that, and he's got to be back to 100%. You know, it's like a video game, right? He's getting he's leveling up. He's getting all of his abilities again. And then the very next thing he does is sit around on a park bench and just mope. I don't even know what to do anymore. You're Lord of the Dreams. What do you mean you don't know what to do with yourself anymore, Morpheus? You need to go back to the dreaming and fix it. Everything's cracked and busted. He's just sitting on a park bench not doing anything. I love that. He's but if he gets to such a wandering like pointless place like that, and he has that adventure with Dream or with Death, and kind of figures himself out again, it's very strange that he gets and this is important too, he solves the problem of reality itself is in jeopardy over the vortex, and he thinks he has to kill the vortex, and ultimately he's able to solve it without doing that, but not through his own ingenuity, just because the great-grandmother just happens to be dreaming at that point and shows up, and I'm not sure if she went there, if she somehow knew she needed to go there on purpose, right? I can't remember now, but it seemed a little easy and convenient in the moment, where she just kind of pops in and is like, that was supposed to be me, folks, and then she gets the glowy heart thing back and puts it in herself, and I'm like, why can't we just blow up the glowy heart thing, and then neither of them has to die, right?
That's what I'm asking.
Oh, okay, like you with me on that? And then
yeah.
So
that's
so
when
Dream
the show kind of lost me a little bit. That's where it felt like superhero comics in a bad way, where its powers are happening.
Yep.
And
no, I'm with you there. No, you're right, but I was still, really invested in it up to that point anyway. And then
I get that.
And then maybe it's more just like, I think part of the thing for me too is it just felt, this is going to sound horrible, this is so superficial, it just felt safer to me as television, where like it's jumping around so much trying to figure out how to be a TV show while adapting a comic book, and then it's finally adapting a thing that's easier to adapt as a TV show, and so it feels more like television, and so I'm with it more, you know what I mean? Like I think that was part of the thing with that. But my point, sorry, with Rose there is he seems to, maybe we're very walled off from him, of course, we're to a degree anyway, where like he's not talking about his feelings, right? That's the reason the Crow is there, by the way, because in the comics we get like internal monologue, and you can't really, they don't want to do a ton of that, so they just have Patton Oswalt talk, which sounds like a good idea in theory, but I don't think it works great in the show. But anyway, so he's not talking about his feelings, but it does seem like he probably feels bad, at least to some degree, that he's going to have to kill the vortex. He's trying to not get too attached and to not feel bad about it. This is just what needs to be done. And then, through really no fault of his own, she's able to be saved. And so you dodged that bullet. Yay, you didn't have to kill a person. And then right before that, again, you went, that baby is from my realm, so I get that later. Because, I'm entitled, I'm a god, ooh, and the character that felt bad about Rose maybe dying is not the same character that does that, right?
Yeah, now I feel like we maybe need a little bit more time with him, or at least like shine just a little bit more of a light on that. Of maybe he doesn't see this as a person, and maybe he needs to understand that like these people do. And I also feel like maybe earlier
That's an
he
excellent
needs.
point.
What if like so he has come to see an individual as a friend? What if he gets rejected by a human, and now he's a little bit more vindictive? You know what I mean? Like
Sure. So that'd
I
be a good
think
way to go. Yeah.
putting him as like the on the back burner as like the B or C story, while like the Corinthian is B and then like Rose is A, and it's like I feel like having him that far on the back burner does cause a little bit of a distance between me and the drama with Dream.
Well, I'm not saying he should have everything figured out and be like perfect after he learns his big lesson.
Of
That
course
would be
not.
awful. I like that he's still arrogant and he's still himself. It takes him time to figure stuff out. I like that it's a slow burn. But the show has the problem that you're talking about with other characters also. So of course it's affecting our protagonist, where sometimes it kind of cuts corners and doesn't feel like, particularly with bad people, with antagonists, it doesn't think that it needs to spend any time with characters that have, sometimes anyway, that have like evil motivations. So sometimes characters will be sympathetic enough. Weirdly, I kind of get where John is coming from. He's not a good person or anything, but like you kind of get it where he's just oversimplified things to the point of like lies made my life terrible. Get rid of those. And like, nah, just like dreams, you gotta have those. There's a reason for that. You know what I mean? It's like fear, you gotta have that. You know, there's such a thing as a benign lie. There's a difference between dreams and lies. I like all of that. And again, I kind of got where he's coming from, even though he's sort of a serial killer. And
Yes.
interesting that he dies right before the serial killer convention, but he's kind of like a serial killer, and yet I sort of get where he's coming from. There are two places in the show where we have a man who is just bad, and he's one-dimensional bad, and I don't know how he got that way, and it's very melodramatic and cliche and easy, and I don't know if the comics have this problem because it's both from things I didn't read. One of them is the foster dad. I don't understand the foster dad with Jed, where he needs to be a foster parent in order because he's poor and he gets $800 a month from it, but he is going to be really mean to the kid and beat him all the time. And some of it's because the kid is running away, but the reason he's running away is because the guy is abusive. How did he get like that? Why is he that way? What led him to acting that way in the first place? Aren't there easier ways for that guy to get his $800 if he just really freaking hates children? Why does it go so far? I don't want to say like almost comedic place because obviously it's not funny, but it goes too far. It takes me out. I don't buy it when he's like, I'm gonna break every bone in your body. That seems like a good idea. You've got the foster people looking at you really closely, and you're doing this to get money, and you're not going to even take care of the kid to the point where he won't have to maybe like be so badly hurt he'd have to go to the hospital or something. This guy makes no sense. Why is he that evil?
That's a good call.
He's so evil.
He is, and I have not finished reading
Puts
that
the kid in the trunk and
yeah, I've read a little bit of that stuff from the comic. I have not had any resolution to that, so I don't know if it's the same or different. It's about 5 points out of 100 more interesting than the way it's presented in the show. But like he also is just sort of like almost like a cartoonishly evil, abusive person, and I don't quite get it. What's the other one? You said there was two.
Now I'm trying to remember it. Okay. I said it was something else I didn't read. Was it in the episode you didn't see, or was it toward the beginning? It'll come to me. I'm not right off now remembering. I had it a couple minutes ago. It'll come to me. But there was another one like that where I was like, oh, I know what it was. So we were talking about animation earlier, and folks that have watched the show are probably wondering why I haven't brought this up yet. The first 15 minutes of the 11th episode are animated, and it adapts an issue. It's very strange about cats. So we have like personified cats in this universe. I guess they're all sentient and think as well as human beings do and can talk to each other sort of telepathically. It's just like Disney-type cats. Okay. And
I know that's one of like those issues. Like it's one of like that issue of the comic is like taught in schools. It is
Really?
like yes, like that issue is like apparently one of the issues of the
I
Sandman.
thought that was very strange, but maybe it reads better in comics. I don't know. And I just watched it this morning. I haven't had any time to think about it, but anyway, I'm not going to get real deep into that. You haven't seen it. But there's a cat that is and there's some thematic stuff in it that's interesting, certainly. But there's a cat that wants to have sort of like a cat revolution because cats domesticated don't have freedom and aren't like treated well enough by their owners, but it's almost like a Matrix situation where like they don't realize it because they're fed and given a nice place to live and stuff, but then if they have kittens, they don't get to choose what happens with their kittens. And there's a guy whose wife has, I guess they have cats together, and it's the whole like, you know, purebred show cat thing where like they're breeding cats, and the cat got with like a stray alley cat that she fell in love with or something, and had kittens, and he's not happy about it, the owner, because they're not, you know, show cats. It's they're just, you know, sort of riff-raff alley cats. So he doesn't sell them, he doesn't give them away, he just puts them all in a bag and ties it up and throws it in the river? And I'm like, why is this guy so evil? He could have done any number of other things. He's like annoyed at his wife. He's like, why did we... He's not like abusing his wife or anything. He's not that crazy evil. He's just throwing cats in the river for no reason. There's any number of other things you could do with them. Why is he like that?
Yeah.
I don't know anyone like that.
Okay, so you started this with talking about John, the man who's sort of like the villain of the first half of the season. I think in the show, this is actually an improvement on the source material, because I think
agree.
Dr. Destiny is just sort of like a nothing villain who's just crazy evil for no reason, as you were talking about
the whole point is that he's a psychopath. He actually has lost himself because of the ruby, and in the show he's got a lot more of an initial motivation. It's not just the ruby making him crazy.
Exactly.
No, it is better.
And the thing is, when it comes to that character, like this is where I was like watching and sort of seeing the development of this as a film, where it's like, okay, if you're making this a film and you're just going to adapt the first arc, it makes sense. Okay, you have an inciting incident, and then you have a quest. You have, you know, these three set pieces, like these three, like, you have the Hell set piece, you have the John Constantine set piece, and you have this other thing where it's like, we got to get the stuff, basically. And then we also need to have a villain, but we need to have the villain to really have like a motivation that's like counter to our hero, and that's going to be John and his whole idea of like mistaking dreams and lies and thinking they are one and the same. And then you have like, you know what I mean? Like
he's got to be a mirror. He's got to be like the anti-dream.
Exactly. When you're conceptualizing this as like that character felt like a movie character if you're making a movie version of the Sandman.
He's also better than Ares. We should just throw that out.
I agree.
Because I like that movie, but Ares is stupid.
So I will say though, that's it. But the difference between someone like John and then like the abusive foster dad, and then I guess man who throws cats in bags and off a river into a river, I guess like that's what I see a disparity there, and that's where I see the development of a different project sticking around. So, that's all.
And I just see it as cutting corners, where it's like these characters are not important enough to be sympathetic in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a trap that a lot of stories fall into.
Yeah, and let's not act like Neil Gaiman's, too good to fall into those traps. Like, those early issues of Sandman have problems. And I think in some ways, like, this does correct some of those. Like, I think the weakest episode of the issue of the Sandman is that 5th issue where Dr. Destiny's just in a car with that woman, and then Sandman has to talk to the Justice League.
That was one of my favorite parts in the show.
Oh yeah,
the tension with them in the car, and then the point that I'm so glad you brought that up, and then like the point that he brings up about like people will do anything for self-preservation, and she's like, all I want is for people to stop lying, and then she vindicates his position by lying to him, like going to the gas station and all of that. That's all wonderful, and I think that actress did a great job.
I agree.
I don't totally understand why she stuck around at the.
I don't either. Either.
When she drops him off, that seemed to be kind of going too far. Where it's like, I kind of get that you're maybe sympathizing with him a little bit at this point, but like he's still a crazy person that's killed people, and you'd be driving away. I don't know, like.
But I also thought that
just so she could get the MacGuffin thing, right? And then I wanted to see her come back later and use it. I hope there's an episode somewhere where she's got that, and we do a follow up. Like, what is she doing with the kill screen beat 'em up game device?
Well, I also want to say, though, that I thought it was like a structurally smart choice to basically have her stuck with him, and like they're on their journey while Morpheus is on his journey through hell. Like cutting back between those two, like there was some coherence to the structure there that I liked a lot.
There was. The problem with it was I was somehow more invested in her side of it than the hell part. And I was
me too.
Really excited about the hell part, and I liked the way that looked, but I didn't have what you had. I didn't love the casting of Lucifer and all of that, and so I just wasn't as into it. And I was kind of worried about the contest. And then the way that was adapted was kind of exactly what I thought they'd do with it. And I was like, yeah, it doesn't translate. Well, but I also don't think it works great on the page. And they didn't change it enough. But they made it... Okay, am I remembering this right? Isn't it him versus the demon in the book? And then here they made it Lucifer. And I thought that was kind of a strange choice.
Yeah, because it's like, well, do you want to have a champion? And then he's like, no, I'll just represent myself. And then the demon's like, I want Lucifer to represent me. And that's why that happens. I would agree.
But am I remembering that right? That like in the book, it's not that, right?
Oh yeah. It's just the demon with two mouths.
It's just the demon, yeah.
Yeah. But
and also, I wish they'd done it like in the comics where it was sort of like a karaoke bar, because that's fun.
Me too.
But
I thought that was fun too. My issue with the hell stuff is also I have some issues with the diner, how they adapt the diner stuff. But we can talk about that in a little bit. I
thought the diner episode was long.
I agree. It's long. I also got Watchmen adapting Chapter 4 vibes from it, where I felt like it's too reductionary.
Oh.
Yeah, but
that's fair.
We can get to that in a second.
Yeah, I didn't love the way they adapted that. Some of the performances are cool.
Yeah.
And again, John's great. Like,
I agree. David Thewlis is like one of the he's like character actor plus. Like, I know who he is. But I never think about him when he's not in a thing, and when he shows up, I'm like, all right, it's this guy. Here we go.
You can't even call him a character actor. He keeps playing the same guy over and over again.
I know, but it's like that's.
But he does it so well.
Plus, he's like plus. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's such a great way to put it. No, he's great.
So my issue is more like in hell, it's direction, right? Like, and this stuff also happens in the diner where it's like when they're doing their contest, it's so overcooked and so overblown, where it's not just. They say a line. It's this really dramatic close-up while.
But that's kind of what the book does too. It's like, how do you directly translate that?
But it's also the way they're reading the lines. Is I am this, and then it's like the sound design goes.
It's unintentionally funny. And don't you want it to just get absurd? Don't you want it to go to like a Hitchhiker's Guide kind of place? Like, I am a bacon and egg sandwich.
Well, and I've never really read a Hitchhiker, so maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like in the comic, it is more like that. Like the demon has two mouths, and like they're talking about being spiders, caught in webs, caught in this, caught in that, and then
this
like
generified it, and it still has the same problem the comic does. Where I was hoping against hope Gaiman would come up with some way to fix my problem with that, and he doesn't. You would lead with hope every time. They're like, this is the oldest game. Nobody ever thought of hope. It's like hope. Oh man, again, screen kill. It's like, well, can't beat that. He thought of hope again. Crap. I'm like, I'm the universe. I'm the multiverse. I'm anti-whatever. Or
I'm the dark multiverse.
I'm anti-life. I love how we're not doing any DC stuff, but we still have anti-life. Okay, I'm anti-life. I'm hope. Crap. I was hoping you wouldn't think of Hope this time.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing is having like Patton Oswalt there basically being Mickey.
I
being
hated
like,
it so much.
I was not.
That ruined that whole scene, and I was already not sure about it. And
Yeah.
then he goes, "Dreams don't effing die!" You're like...
Yeah. That was like in Rocky 5 when Mickey is like, "Get up, Rocky! 'Cause
Yeah.
Mickey loves you." It was
Oh,
so-
I wasn't sure what you meant by Mick. Yeah, absolutely. I just like nails on a chalkboard for me. I was like, you guys don't realize this doesn't play for drama.
But
It
and then-
doesn't.
But that was the other thing is like there was a lot of and I went back and looked in episodes 5 or like the 4 and 5 the Hell issue and the Diner issue were both directed by the same person, and I think that might be kind of what I'm responding to is there's a lot of like just like when they're in the diner and like the wife and the husband are sitting in the booth and then like it'll be this extreme close up on the wife going, "You will not eat that," like sound design, and it's like, okay, you can chill, guys.
Get it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Be more subtle about it because what should be creepy and unsettling is just the performances.
Yeah, and like maybe like you don't understand how weird the thing you're looking at is yet, and like that,
And that's
like,
okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I would personally like out of it, but
That's
I
such
don't
a good
know,
point. Sound design with that stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
and then like I actually like the musical score quite a bit. It's maybe a little generic in places, but I do like the main
I
theme.
didn't find myself thinking about it that much, which
But
is not
I-
always a good sign with me because I pay a lot of attention to score, and I wasn't a lot with the show. So
I do think that the way it's used is very typical. Like it is telegraphing what you're supposed to be feeling too much, and specifically in like stuff like the diner issue of Sandman is my favorite issue from those early issues. It's not as good as like the death issue,
mine's the
but
death
like
issue.
I mean the death issue is wonderful. Like that one is the best. My favorite is the 6th issue with John and the diner. Like it's difficult. It maybe
It is.
crosses a line at a certain point. But its commitment to its worldview is admirable. And my issue with the way they adapt it is my problem. Okay, I should probably explain my problem with the way Snyder adapts Watchmen Chapter 4 in his movie is that it basically reduces I feel like it reduces Dr. Manhattan to women, am I right? It's like he's just the guy who just has a bunch of lady issues, and that's what I don't like about the way that adapts that. And with this, it's way too preoccupied with the weird sex stuff going on in that issue, and it takes what's kind of happening under the surface and just makes it the text for like more than half of the episode, and I really didn't like that. I felt like it's the high schooler way of adapting.
That's a great point.
Issue.
I don't disagree with that. Honestly, I was not real with it through that episode. I was finding it difficult to not let my mind wander. And I don't think I would have had that if I didn't know the material, because that's an issue that I did read and we talked about a lot on the channel. But when the video Austin and I did, but while I'm watching the episode, I kept kind of looking at my watch. I was like, when do we get to like the real creepy stuff? And like, I part of the problem is just I knew what was happening, I guess. But I think it could have handled more effectively. There's also a character or two in that episode that are made really insufferable to me at the beginning, and that's not how you do that.
Like the woman waiting for her girlfriend to show up was
she's
so
awful.
irritating.
Why is she so awful?
I don't know. And did you notice that she's talking to Rose on her phone at one point? Like Rose from like later episodes.
No.
She's like talking on her video phone to Rose.
Oh.
And I'm like, wait a minute.
That's how they're setting that up?
Wait, hold on. And then it never comes back up in the next.
Is that just a friend? Because obviously that's not supposed to be. Rose is supposed to be her girlfriend, right?
No. It's like I think her girlfriend starts with a D. It's like just her.
Right.
It's like her friend, and she's talking to Rose. Where she's like, "Have you seen my girlfriend? I think we broke up last night. We're supposed to meet up." Yeah.
It's a small world.
Yeah, really small world. Maybe that's like a little detail I missed in the first issue or first trade, because like there's a lot of setup in the first trade that I'm realizing was set up that I didn't realize was set up when I was first reading it.
Yeah.
But Yeah, I guess anytime you see three women standing next to each other,
Oh,
which
is that
is
right?
yeah, like well, that's the thing is like in
I
this.
thought that was one of the most typical things in the show. Is just the way they were adapted. Like I've seen that. The if you're talking about the Fates,
Yes,
the
yeah.
way the Fates are adapted in this, I've seen 100 times. I was hoping they'd come up with some new spin on that, but like the whole. You see the three of them, and then like they'll talk and they'll finish each other's sentences, and you see one, and then they flash to the next one, they flash to the next one. I feel like I've seen that.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't. Uh, I'm fine with it in this, mostly because I don't know. They're not in it a whole lot,
We see
and
him a lot more than I thought we would, though.
we do. But this is like where I felt stupid is when in that diner issue of the Sandman, where you do have Dr. Destiny talking to like the three women who are in it and like tell me my future, and they do. Yeah. And I was like not thinking of the Fates at all, and this one just has to like come out and show you it. Yeah. And I'm like, oh,
yeah. Now I understand.
I feel really dumb right now.
Let me get back to these super chats real quick because we never finished them. Thank you guys and thanks for your patience. Bob the Hun, $2 super chat. David Goyer wrote a Sandman script, no joke. Well, he's one of the main showrunners for this show, and I guess. To your point earlier, it's hard. I guess it is kind of hard to imagine that we wouldn't keep anything from earlier drafts of a movie version if we've got the guy that was working on one of those.
Yeah, I'm glad this super chat brought this up because this there was somewhat of a when I was watching the first couple of episodes, like there's something that's kind of dated about this show. It's kind of charming, but it does feel like, all right, we need to make a Sandman show. Twilight's really popular right now. Harry Potter's really popular right now. Inception just came out. Like, what do we got? Let's do Sandman. And so it kind of looks a lot like that era. But then
that's a lot of the reason it almost got made in like the mid 2000s, because Warner's was like, we really need to get more stuff on the fantasy bandwagon with how huge Lord of the Rings is and everything. And there's even a quote from Gaiman where he's like, we haven't made Sandman yet because if we make it, he was real trepidatious about this. And he's like, and understandably so, he's like, if we make it, I need somebody that's as passionate as Peter Jackson was making Lord of the Rings. Like he said that.
And when I was watching the show, I'm like, there's something kind of dated, but also somewhat charming about the dated quality. And then I saw those words, David S. Goyer, and I'm like, that's it.
Yeah,
that's it.
I also think that he could be, and I know that we're not totally in agreement on this, but some of what you might be picking up on when you say that it doesn't carve out enough of its own style or take might just be the Goyer of it. Because I've had that issue with other stuff he's made, like Krypton has that, and that show's terrible. Don't watch that show. But like Goyer is a writer; he's not a director. We all know this if we've seen Blade Trinity.
And I have seen Blade Trinity.
and he's also a real hit and miss writer, although it's maybe not fair to say. Don't you almost wish, sorry, I'm gonna run off on a tangent for a second. Don't you sometimes wish that a TV or movie writer was had that like 5 years of a run in comics just so you had a sense if they were actually a decent writer or not? Yeah. Because when you see somebody's name on a bunch of different projects, and some of them are brilliant and some of them are awful, kind of the who's the guy that like rewrote the 90s Batman movies and then
Akiva Goldsman.
Akiva Goldsman, yeah. Like I think his name is on A Beautiful Mind, maybe. I forget, but like
he won an Oscar for that. Yeah.
That's okay. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. I think that's a brilliant script. But then he's written a lot of really terrible things, and he's one of the showrunners for Picard. Also, stay away from that. Don't watch Krypton before you watch Picard. That's how bad Picard is. All of it. Not just the first season, all of it. But anyway, I don't know where I was going with that. But you get people like that where you're like, don't understand how this guy could also write this thing. Well, that's because things get massively compromised all the time in Hollywood, of course, and just because you have names for story, names for screenplay and whatever, you don't really know what actually went down and whose words are whose, etc. I've said this 1,000 times, but like Goyer's name is totally off of Dark Knight Rises. You can point out at least 2 or 3 lines of dialogue that he must have written. There's no way around it. Like when Batman shows back up in the 3rd act and he's like, "I'm here to stop you." That's a Goyer line. Nobody else wrote that line. Goyer wrote that line. I don't care that his name's not on it. Goyer wrote that line. You'll never convince me otherwise. If I ever meet him, that's the first thing did you write? I'm here to stop. No, I'm here to stop you. Yeah, yes you did. Don't tell me you didn't. You wrote that. Anyway, but. So I don't know how good or bad of a writer Goyer is really. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's some consistency too in some of the not so great. Is the point I'm making?
Well, and I'm glad you brought up comics because my brother's actually in the process of reading the Justice Society of America run from the 2000s, where that starts off as David S. Goyer and James Robinson, and then it becomes David S. Goyer and Jeff Johns. And I think Jeff Johns eventually that's where like Stargirl comes from. That's why a lot of people like Stargirl.
I didn't know Goyer ever did comics.
I guess he did. But every so often I'll be at work and my brother will just send me a panel of just some really cringy line of dialogue. He'd be like, David S. Goyer strikes again. I'm like, all right, here we go. And yeah, sometimes
we do know. I'm sorry. You should have stopped me in the middle of that diatribe. No, Cap, we have the evidence. We can take this to court, sir.
But at the same time, he's co-writing that with James Robinson. I like James Robinson a lot, but he also has some misses. So you never know who's, doing what. And
there are genuinely hit and miss writers, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in the case of writing, especially like when you're in Hollywood, you get a job. It's just give us this many pages by tomorrow or next week, and it's like, okay, you gotta write it. Like the story's given to you, and then there's script doctors, and there's it's a mess, as you say. Just because the name's there, that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Doesn't mean anything.
But there is there's a Goyer touch to this that is identifiable. I think it's like an X factor.
I think that's a lot of what you're picking up on, or you're picking up on. And I can't argue with that because I'm seeing it too. I'm with you.
I'm feeling it more in those early episodes though than the later episodes, I would say.
Well, maybe that's why I like those more.
Maybe.
Chewbacca's Lover, $5 super chat. Sandman was almost in an episode of Batman the Animated Series. Also was almost part of the DC direct-to-DVD line early on. Got canned for not being Batman Superman. That's sad. Well, it's sort of sad because I don't really want to see the Sandman adapted into an 85-minute movie. I don't know what you even do with that, where, again, it doesn't just feel like a setup for a story that you may or may not ever tell. I didn't know that, but I bet what happened was they made Wonder Woman, and then it didn't do very well, and then they went, okay, everything has to be Batman Superman now. Although you said first 4. Oh no, I'm sorry, you didn't say that. I just saw the number 4 because you wrote 4 instead of 4, and then my brain did a stupid association thing. I bet that's why. I bet it's because they did they did Wonder Woman, and I guess they did some Green Lantern ones too. But anyway, I did know about Batman the Animated Series because that is chronicled in Paul Dini's semi-autobiographical, I guess entirely autobiographical, Dark Knight, which I'm sure you've read, but he talks about that in that book.
I've actually not read that. I really want to.
You got to. It's wonderful. It's one of my favorite things.
I remember when it was first announced, that sounds like it's going to be incredible, and then I never got around to reading it. And then
it's killer.
I will. I want to read that.
I'm going to make a note. And make sure, because I've reviewed that. I'll talk about it again. But regardless, I'm gonna make sure you read that. Let me write this down. Connor.
He's doing it, guys. He's doing
it. Read. Anyway, go ahead. Take us anywhere.
Oh yeah. Well, here's what I'm a little curious about. Well, Sandman did show up in Dark Knight's Metal for a second to be like, I'm here, and then
Well,
you
that's
dipped
because
out.
everyone showed up in Dark Knight's Metal.
Yeah, that's true.
How have they
But
not announced that as an animated movie yet? You know that's coming. You know that's coming.
yeah, that's coming. But the thing is, I'm a little surprised that, you know, I guess when we're talking about adapting the Sandman and we're talking and making a Sandman movie, not that this is a good movie at all, but I'm a little surprised we don't take more with this property the Dark Tower approach.
Yeah.
That movie's awful and also spent forever in development hell and actually has a lot of overlap
And is
with
one
this
of the most
project.
compromised things you've ever seen. But you know what? This show looks a little bit like parts of that.
It does. It does. I was actually thinking of the Dark Tower quite a bit while watching this, even though this is
thought of that since I
much
saw
better.
it.
Yeah.
Because it was completely unmemorable. No, that's not true. I thought about it a few weeks after it came out because I saw pop figures marked down to like $3 or $4 everywhere.
Well, what you're doing is you're pulling up your list of like, what movies have I seen this year? Oh yeah, The Dark Tower, and then you never thought about it ever again.
That's right.
But yeah, oh my God, at one point Ron Howard was going to make that. But the thing is, that movie is not really adapting any one book. It's kind of just trying to tell a version of that story, but in a new way.
Real truncated.
And after the 75 issue run of the Sandman ended, he did do like Endless Nights, which was like I think that was just an original graphic novel. The Dream Hunters was an original graphic novel. The Sandman Overture was a 6-issue miniseries that was like a prequel. Like, if you're going to do like an animated movie like they're talking about, why doesn't you just get Neil Gaiman to say, hey, can you just maybe write an original screenplay for like a new Sandman adventure? And that way you don't have to worry about adapting this unruly, gigantic, like, thing, behemoth. And you have to worry about that in 80 minutes.
The worry from executives and producers and maybe even creative people sometimes is just mythology. Like, what people struggle with Sandman, I'm sure, in trying to figure out how to adapt it, is how much do you need to understand the background and the lore to even know what you're looking at?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the book spends a lot of time giving you that stuff, certainly within a narrative, but still, like, it seems like part of the reason that Gaiman, I might be talking out of the other side of my face, but it kind of feels like part of the reason Gaiman starts with, let's make him a victim, let's have him stuck in a place, is because it's kind of easier when he gets out to make him the eyes in character, and then have him have to deal with all the mythology that he's not a part of anymore, so you can understand the mythology. Like, how would you give us some of that stuff if it was just... When you say another Sandman adventure, okay, well, now it's just for the people that already know about Sandman. Like, it would be the worry. I think there's a way to do it.
Okay,
That's the worry. I'm giving you the devil's advocate.
No,
I'm giving you the Lucifer Morningstar advocate argument.
And I think you're probably onto something there. Also, I know Beelzebub.
And it's too beloved, so that's what they want to adapt. That's like saying, well, don't adapt Death of Superman. Here's these other good Superman stories. But that's the one that sold 1 million copies, so that's what we have to do.
That is true. Okay, I guess the Constantine movie is probably a better thing, where it's like it takes the kind of more famous aspects of Hellblazer and kind of condenses it all. But someone like me who's never read Hellblazer, and that's because Hellblazer doesn't have the beloved reputation that Sandman does, you can still, like, do it, but you know what I mean? You're doing it, you're condensing it, and you're adapting it all into a way that's more traditional to what the medium is, right? Like, they're condensing Hellblazer into a movie, 2-hour kind of supernatural.
And they still use the most beloved story as the starting place for that.
Yeah, you're right.
But no, that's a good point. At the same time, that movie is so few and far between, where it's actually a pretty decent movie, but it's so unlike the source material in a lot of ways. So, like, it's frustrating for big fans of it, but it's compromised in such a way. It's kind of like The Mask, where, like, it's compromised in such a way where it's still a good movie, but it's not really what it was. Like,
yeah, but I don't know. Like, I watched the Constantine movie and I didn't love it, but I respected it, and it did make me want to read Hellblazer comics, which I think makes it a successful movie, right?
Yeah, sure.
And they're making a sequel. They
Yeah.
were waiting for Connor to watch it, and now that I did, they're finally making a sequel.
That's what happens to me all the time, man. If I take a look at a thing that I always meant to look at, next week you're gonna find out that. Sorry, I'm running away with myself again. I apologize, but can I tell you about this one because it's really funny?
Go for it.
For no good reason at all, a couple weeks ago, I had a free night, and I was exercising. I was like, I'm gonna watch a movie, and I threw in Eraser. The Schwarzenegger film, because I saw that in the theater when I was a kid and I hadn't seen it since then, and I was like, I'm gonna watch a Schwarzenegger movie, and I throw on Eraser, which is hammy as hell, but has one of the greatest over the top, insanely convoluted, like jump out of an airplane scene I've ever seen. I'll tell you about it later, and then I found out a week later the rebooting Eraser is a TV show. Because of course they are, because I watched it.
Wow. Hey, there's like our market research. We finally broke the minimum required views to watch it. Some guy in Kansas.
I broke it on Netflix, or whatever stream service it was. I watched it. They needed that one more view, and they greenlit that.
But hey, speaking of Constantine, let's talk about the adaptation of Constantine.
Okay,
which
so
they finally say correctly.
Yeah,
but I just wanted to quickly say,
I hate that.
How did you like that our introduction to Constantine is basically our introduction to the John Constantine in the Constantine movie from 2005? Well, it's like a preacher's like, hey, I got this thing for you to do. I can't take care of it, but maybe you can. And then they're like, okay, I'll take care of it. And they go off and do the thing. And
I guess
like
it's kind of true, but I would have loved her over a mirror, like trying to exorcise a demon.
I mean, I think the movie version does it much better. I like how we keep cutting back to the cigarette that's burning on like the dresser and all that.
Constantine fans are going to be annoyed that she doesn't smoke a cigarette. I'm not surprised by that. The show is in some places kind of safe like that. She doesn't get her hands dirty enough for Constantine. And when you mention that they pronounce it right finally, however you feel about the gender flipping thing, and I guess part of the reason they did that and didn't just go with the original character is because they thought at the time, because like everything's already old at the time it comes out, that there was going to be an HBO Max show for Constantine, and I think they've already scrapped that and that's not happening, and then the movie version's happening, or the movie sequel, whatever. Isn't it irritating that we finally get the right pronunciation and it's not even that character? Like, so we got Constantine, but it's Joanna Constantine.
I feel bad for a lot of those, Hellblazer fans. See, like that was an interesting thing because like that, I wasn't crazy about that issue of the comic. But,
no, I wasn't either.
But that being said, like, so I just had like a funny like observation where like, first of all, this lady way too hot to be Constantine, or Constantine, because it's like I'm just thinking like, okay, if we did get this like gender flipped back to what it was, right? Let's say it's John Constantine.
You're having the problem that one of the viewers did earlier with Pretty Boy Dream.
Yeah.
She's too attractive.
Like, she's way too attractive, and it's like this would be like if we got Henry Cavill to play John Constantine and he's dolled up as Pierce Brosnan and James Bond the whole time. Like it's like he does. It's I don't know. Like this.
You know what? It'd be like if you got Keanu Reeves.
Sure, but he does. Okay. He is kind of a slob in that movie.
Yeah. Well, they pretend like she is, but she's dressed all posh all the time.
She wears one of the nicest looking coats I've ever seen on a woman.
Why
is
awesome. Any version of John Constantine wearing a $500 coat?
I don't know. It looks like that coat that Anya Taylor-Joy wears in Last Night in Soho, where it's like this 60s chic fashion. Like, it looks awesome.
She looks like she should be walking down a runway in it. No, you're absolutely right. And I didn't think of it until you said that, but you're so right about it.
But, like, so somehow this actress, Jenna Coleman, is 36. She looks like she's 25. You need to get an actress who's 36 who looks like they're 45. All right, you need to get the person who was like a child actor, then burnt out for 10 to 15 years,
again,
and now they're
not
back.
All pretty people in the show. They do some of that casting.
Yeah, exactly. You need to get someone who has like a gravelly voice, like a British Natasha Lyonne. Get me someone like that. All right, and but I don't know. I think Jenna Coleman does a very good job. I just think the casting was just odd in terms of like why they got her.
I think they cast on charisma and nothing else, and figured that the script would give us the rest of it. it. And she has charisma. I just don't know if it's of the right type. But again, like we said, I don't mean to repeat ourselves too much, but like we said earlier, like a million years ago now, I think it's more the page than it is her. Like, Constantine's supposed to have, like, is like a wordsmith and just has this real specific way of speaking that nobody else, like, she doesn't have that. She doesn't have a lot of clever things to say. You needed the kind of dialogue that you had in the Constantine TV show, which is wonderfully written, in her mouth. Like, forget whether or not she's gender flipped. So she's a woman now? She can't be clever? Like, I don't know. Like, where is that? Like, that's that character. And they're clearly not... I don't think they have a take where it's like, we're going to do this totally different version of this character. I really think they think they're doing a female version of exactly John Constantine, and that's not what it is.
No.
But I think they think it is.
And my only experience with Constantine is the one issue of Sandman I read where he's in it. And it's like, he is like a slob and has like dirty clothes, and he's like off-putting and like yells at old ladies, and it's kind of funny. And like
and he's a womanizer,
dirty apartment is like this, really kind of Vogue attic space, and it's got this really nice moonlight coming in through it, and it's like, I don't know.
But Dream can't stand the mess to the point where she thinks he's gonna clean it up when she leaves.
Yeah. Oh well, that was just something I wanted to bring up because I thought it was funny, and like that's a character.
I don't think she's bad. I want better writing for her.
I would too.
If they decided to spin her off in her own show or something, I would be sad because I loved the TV show, and it sucks that actor had to go on to Legends of all things to keep playing that character. But I think if you wrote it right, you could win me more over on her. How do you overall feel about the choice to not do regular DC Comics characters in this show? Because people are complaining about that. I think that's the only way to go. I think you have to do it that way.
And honestly, the way it watches, and you had said, and Austin had told me the same thing, where J.J. Abrams' whole embezzlement scheme with WB is alleged embezzlement scheme over at WB is, he's going to be developing this Hellblazer show for HBO Max. It'll never materialize, not like everything else he's developed for the last 5 years. But like, so you have like that whole thing going on, and okay, I guess that tracks. But when it comes to the way the show plays out, the way it read to me was that we're trying to sever any connections to the DC Comics characters in the wider universe of other published characters.
And Gaiman came out and said that was the point.
And so if you're going to gender flip Constantine, that makes sense to me then.
Okay, but then why not just...
To distance it.
But then why not just give her a different name entirely?
And that's
what's a little weird about it, because you don't have anybody else. You don't have Etrigan. You don't have... obviously, Martian Manhunter's not going to show up, but like you don't have any of those characters. But you do have a character named Constantine. And the thing is, you might say, oh, well, like, she's got, obviously, a different name. They're kind of trying to make her a different character. But, like, Joanna Constantine is also a comic character that's like that's like an ancestor.
I was going to
because that's what, the Countess or something. You get her in this show, so you have two Joanna Constantines played by the same actress, and that's a little hokey.
That was weird.
Because if you don't know comics, you might watch that and be like, oh, wait, is she immortal? Like I could see a person watching that and not realize those are supposed to be two different characters, because they are supposed to be two completely different characters.
I mean, you have that line in like the second episode where he's like, oh, I knew one of her ancestors, but you could forget that by the time you've met her, and then also her ancestor, and then, because you're in a show where there's an immortal guy he's talking to.
When he said that, I didn't figure that we would ever pay it off in any way, so I thought it was the show. It wasn't, ultimately. I thought his saying, I knew a Constantine once, was they're throwing a bone to Constantine fans, saying they just switched the time periods. John Constantine existed back in the 1800s, and Joanna Constantine is here now, but that's not what they did. That's what they should have done. That's not what they did. I say that's what they should have done. I guess if you're going to have Joanna Constantine in that episode, you can't do that, because now you're going to have a... cameo for John Constantine in one scene in the 1800s.
What's that actor's name? Matt Ryan? Is that
Matt Ryan? Yeah.
Yeah. He just shows up and he's like, "Hey, And then he just walks
The
away.
1800s, John Connor, or 17. I forget which decade or which century that was, but yeah.
And he's wearing the same coat and the same. He's smoking cigarettes, and he just walks by.
He's got like a pipe.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
That'd be so good.
Nice frock coat. Yeah.
But yeah, Gaiman said, and this is what I figured it was. He said, we don't want to do connections to DC characters, I guess with the exception of Constantine, because we get away from that in the comics later. So let's be consistent with it from the beginning. And I figured that you'd have to do that. You're not going to make a Spawn movie and Youngblood show up. Like, you know, we get away from the continuity stuff. And the second thing was, he said, we don't want to confuse people and make them think that it's part of, you know, a larger DCEU or something. It's a thing that's, you know, all by itself. And again, in the comics, it ultimately was that also. So that's the only way to do it, I think.
By the way, speaking of Spawn, how did you feel about that special new announcement that Todd McFarlane let us know about?
He got like actual writers to write his movie because the studio forced him to, because of course they weren't going to accept that script. Because you ever read any Todd McFarlane writing? Obviously nobody has, because everybody was so excited with that. It was, oh, he's writing and directing, it'll be great. He created that character. No, that's why it'll suck. That's why you'll be bored to tears after 10 minutes. Everybody's going to walk out of the theater going, I just had a $12 nap. That was never going to get made.
His Facebook announcements where it's like Microsoft Paint, like, big news, Spawn movie coming.
The best thing about it was he goes, why are we talking about this now? The best thing about it was when he goes, we're going to have a big announcement tomorrow. And then he goes, I'm really sorry, the next day, we have to put it off till tomorrow. And I'm like, why? Like they didn't get that completely solidified until the very next day? Was there still a thing you had to sign?
Like, everyone knows Hollywood ink takes a couple of days to dry. They're just waiting for the signatures to, it's legal, right?
I'm pretty sure that contract was written in disappearing, reappearing ink.
Anyways.
I meant to talk about that on the Captain Logan show the other day, and it never came up. And I'm so glad you mentioned it. I might talk about that Tuesday. No,
I
Tuesday
don't give a single
I might talk about that Thursday. Say again.
I don't give a single crap about Spawn. Geekvolution Spawn content is my favorite genre of YouTube video. All right, so I had to hear you talk about it.
That's hilarious. Thanks. I don't know what to do with that. Anyway. Okay, so can we talk about the goth chick elephant in the room?
Oh yeah, let's talk about death.
Okay. This is just a me thing. So it's not a me thing. I know other people are probably sad about this as well. This is casting that at the face of it, I had a really hard time with. Like when we start that, because I didn't look at any background stuff with this, so I didn't realize that we did an ethnicity flip with her. And that episode opens and you see her and I'm like, for years, and like I never read Sandman, but Death does show up in some other DC stuff, and I've always loved her design, and I think it's like really iconic, and I always wanted to see it adapted in something. And I always thought that she could get like her own TV show, and it would be really super cool. And then she shows up, and obviously, because it's a different ethnicity, you can't make her up to look like she did in the comics. And so, I don't mean to be superficial about it, I had a tough time with it right away, because that is an iconic look I've always wanted to see on screen, and I'm not going to get it now. And the actress is wonderful. It took me forever to get on board with it. And I can't help it. I'm still kind of sad about it. Like, I'm just, we took Dream right off the page, but we couldn't do it with Death. And, that ended up being my favorite episode, and I loved her performance, and I can't wait to see her come back if they get another season, but I can't help visually not being a little bit sad about it. And I know there's folks that would be like, oh, that makes you racist or whatever. There's other ethnicity flip characters they did I don't care. There's gender flip characters with lots of things in movies and stuff I don't care about. Let's be adults and look at the context of it. This is just a character that I always thought would look really cool to see on screen, the kind of like 90s goth chick of it. And we're never gonna get that now. It's kind of sad to me. Can I have that opinion? Is that okay?
No. And I think what it is that like the Endless's skin is like white. It's not like lower pigmentation. It's like paper white. It's just like they don't have color in their skin. And the guy who plays Dream, they obviously didn't like completely make him like paper white.
Well, their take is clearly make each of them look completely different.
Yeah,
From each
but
other.
that's the thing is like, Desire straight up looks like Desire like from the comics,
And I haven't got
obviously,
that far.
but like he's got the same
Whoa, what
like.
was that?
My bathroom door has a creak to it, and I guess my brother's got to use the restroom. So.
Sorry.
My bad. I'm sorry, guys. It's
No,
October.
it's fine. I was just
Woo!
like,
Haunted
something's
house.
coming after us.
Woo! Yeah, I think it's a monster. But no, I get where you're coming from, and like, if I wanted to, like, yeah, you're right. Their goal is to like make everyone look different, right? But there is like that part in this is just like headcanon stuff. Maybe this gets contradicted. When he goes to hell and he talks to that character Nada, like he appears as a black man.
Yeah.
Now maybe Death is just making herself appear this way. Maybe that's just the way she looks. It's unknown, but we do know that the Endless can make themselves look, I guess, however they want to look to other people. Maybe that's just the way she chooses to look. Maybe she can, as like a fan service thing, they'll make her look like her comic book character from like design in an episode of like a later season, maybe. I don't know. I had that thought too. But at the end of the day, like, I think that actress is just so good, and I don't have the same attachment to that design that you have, so it didn't really bother me.
Well, and I don't even think it's fair for me to have the attachment that I do, because I didn't even read Sandman until a couple months ago, so I kind of like hesitated even bringing that up. But like 10 years ago, I was introduced to that character in a Superman comic of all things, and I immediately was enamored with that design. And we retroactively, it seems like we cast the actress that was right for the part, so that's good. Like, I've always been an advocate for that. Where like I want to be totally colorblind about stuff, like to an extreme. Honestly, I've always been. I guess it's a case-by-case thing, of course, but and maybe I'm just conflicted on it. There's a part of me that sometimes, if you got the right performance out of it, I almost want the stage play thing for movies and TV, where it's like, this is a man, but it's played by a woman because she's just that damn good. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You can't always really do. I don't actually want to see Martin Luther King played by a white man just because he gives the right performance. But then there's a part of me that also thinks that should be okay. Does that make any sense? Just because it's about the performance.
Like, yeah, you saw in like that play about Jack Kirby, and like they were doing that, right? Like,
yeah.
So, and yeah, no, and I come from like I don't come from, but like I participated in theater in high school, and like there was a lot of that going on, and like there's something kind of really impressionistic and cool about that, right?
But also forces you to use your imagination.
Yeah, I like it too.
So I'm just saying that like there's I obviously sound like I'm contradicting myself. That part of me should be like, well, yes, anybody can play Death if she's right for it. But at the same time, there's just a look I wanted to see how they were gonna pull off, and then they didn't try because of who they decided to cast.
Yeah. But how good is she, right?
She's so good.
That's
the thing.
And like there's a line she has.
And I'm not saying that to keep people. I'm not saying that to keep people from being upset with me for this opinion. Where it's like, well, I have to say that the performance is good because I'm complaining that they cast a black actress to play that role. No, she's that good. And if I didn't think she was, I would complain about her performance, of course.
And when I was reading that last issue in the first trade, where she's like,
that episode made me cry.
Whoa! Oh, great. Okay, because like that episode gave me chills, and like it made me feel something, which the rest of the show didn't. I enjoyed it. Like I was able to watch it and like keep going along with it because I was doing a review for it, but also because like I was curious to see where it was all going. That episode, and particularly how she speaks to that older Jewish man with the violin, and the way they walk away together, and like the way she like was like talking to the baby, and like
that was
all of that was so good. And like when it just cuts to Death's face, or sorry, Dream's face, as he's just kind of he's not moving his face, but you can see it what he's thinking, and it's all so good. Like that's easily the best episode.
It felt like they were all waiting to adapt that issue. It was almost like, this is the reason we're making the show. Like
I agree.
I would show that episode to people out of context.
I would too. And
that's a great story all by itself.
And then the way they pair it with the other issue that it's doing was tasteful
I
and
was
cool.
like, this should be 2 episodes. Why are we doing this? And then it wends itself back around at the end, and the reason he goes to see the guy that he was seeing every century that he's late to now, obviously, is because of the lesson he learned from death earlier in the episode. And this is wonderful television.
Yeah,
Where is this these days? Like,
I guess it's one episode right in the middle of a season on a streamer, right?
Yeah, and I like the show overall. That is head and shoulders above every other episode. I mean, it's like this. Like,
I agree. It was pretty amazing. And she has that line early on where she's kind of letting Dream have it, where she's like, "You are the worst, most self-centered, anthropomorphized personification I've ever seen." When I read that on the page, I was like, I knew we were going to be doing this discussion. Like, I cannot imagine an actor in this day and age wrapping their mouth around that dialogue in a way that's not trying to be Deadpool.
And it was almost verbatim.
And it was better than what I had in my head when I read it. Like, it was so, like, I'm like, okay, that won me over on the performance right away. I'm like, okay, I'm in good hands.
So where it turned me around completely on her was when, I mean, I was liking her fine from the beginning, but like I said, I had this disconnect where I'm like, this isn't what I wanted. And then she's in the scene with the crib with the baby, and I had this thought. I went, that's the face you want to see when you die.
Oh.
Because the whole point is that she's not Grim Reaper. She's not taking lives. She is there to comfort you when you move on. And that was the point in the comics. I appreciated it way more here because she's so empathetic and you believe that she cares about everybody. And they had the guts to even include in the montage of people dying, like bad people. Like, there's like I forget, I'm not sure, I never knew what it was, but there's like a drug dealer, or somebody gets shot on the street or something, like somebody that probably did something that got himself killed, and she still shows up like with everybody else, and is there to comfort him when he moves on. It's like, I understand you. Like, there's this almost like Mr. Rogers thing to it, where it's like everybody can like you just for who you are, and like that just got me. The baby scene, and I don't mean to like go too far with this, but I'm just reporting what the experience I had. This is what I did in the comics. Something about like infant death and children not getting a chance to grow up, like, I can't deal with it. It bothers me. It hurts my feelings. And that's part of why I was so on about, by the way, the foster dad, because like, if you're gonna put a kid in that much danger and you're gonna make me feel so heartbroken for him, or try to, I need to appreciate the other side a little bit, because that's like, he's just this insane force of nature for no reason, and like you have to earn putting a kid in a trunk. I don't really want to see that. You have to earn that. Daredevil with Kingpin's dad earns that. Where was that? You know what I mean? Like, if I have to watch this kid get beat, if I have to watch this kid get locked in a cellar or a basement or whatever, I need to buy it, and I didn't. But anyway, with the so the infant death thing, I had such a hard time with it in the comics. Like, I had to stop reading the comic for a second. I couldn't deal with it. And it's because of the, it's not just the situation, it's the dialogue. It's her line when she says, "This is all there is." When she says to the baby. And I really like, by the way, that in the show the baby doesn't talk, because I don't think that would work. In the comic, the baby talks, and the ghost of the baby says, "Really? Like, this is all there is?" And she, like, I'm getting choked up just thinking about it. And she says, "Yeah, sorry, little one. This is it. This is all there is." And her line delivery broke me. Like, I stopped watching it, just like I did the comic. I paused it. I had to leave it for 10 minutes. I couldn't deal with it. It hurt my feelings, but it needed to. And then I went, sold. Like, she's it. Yeah. She's wonderful. Forget it. Give her a show. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and...
that's the face you want to see when you die.
That's a great way of articulating it. That's something I was kind of curious about when I was reading the comic. I'm like, I wonder if they're going to make the baby talk. Because That's something I like that you can do in comics. You can draw a little balloon and then connect it to
This is
the
called
baby.
adaptation, right?
Yes. But I'm like, are they going to do it? And then when they do have her talking to it while you just hear it making baby noises, I'm like, this is the correct decision to make. But like,
It's sadder
yeah.
that way because it suggests that the ghost of the baby never develops in any way. Like in the comic, the baby stays a baby, but is suddenly able to articulate words, and it suggests that that baby will forevermore, as a spirit, stay at the stage that it is developmentally. That's horrible.
That's really sad. Yeah.
I just can't deal with it.
And the saddest thing about that is like the mom has like she didn't do anything.
It's so sad.
Like,
she had this
I
whole
don't even know what happened.
For a baby. Yeah, ugh.
I don't mean to keep this reliving this experience for you, Cap.
Yeah,
Why don't you
I'm
take us
going
to
to corner. I can't deal with it. Call me a sap. I can't. It really bothers me. Well, and this is like
I get it.
I don't want to make a big deal out of like where I am in life and everything, but like as a dad, like I've got 5 kids, and like it's your worst fear, right? Like,
yeah. Where do you want to go next with this?
Bob the Hun, $5 super chat. Patton Oswalt is a geek comedian, so he has to be in every geek thing for no reason, but he's not that good. His big claim to fame is being a geek comic, and I've never listened to his stand-up.
I also have not listened to any of his stand-up. I know that he is a comedian. And that's about it. I also know that he's a geek, and that's about it.
Yeah. That's not credentials as an actor.
Okay. He's MODOK. He's Pip the Troll. He's on Red Letter Media sometimes for one episode of Best of the Worst. Yeah, there we go. Those are his credentials.
He's on New MST3K. Yeah, but those aren't credentials. He got those. He's on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He got those things because he's a geek.
That's right.
Being a geek is what got him that. Those other... There's no chicken and the egg thing. Those other things he didn't get because he was in those other things. He started doing all that because he was a geek in the first place.
That's true. Maybe he just knows somebody.
I don't mean to just keep dogging on Patton Oswalt. This was a super chat. I was done with that. Again, I don't dislike him. Like he just keeps showing up in everything. I don't know. Well, I did hate his MODOK. That was the worst. And he made that show. He wrote that. Like, that was all him.
Uh-oh. Well, sorry, Patton.
I don't know that I have much else to go to. We're already over 2 hours. Is there any other major aspect of this, or just any big point that you haven't gotten to make that you want to go ahead and make? I mean, we haven't brought up, obviously, everything, but...
Yeah, we've been keeping a pretty overview, and we are approaching this as people who are familiar with at least some of what this is adapting.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess at the end, when it does kind of come down to the dream vortex and the great grandmother and heart-shaped glass and like all this other stuff that's going on, I found that to be a little disappointing. Heart-shaped glass, yeah, that's my favorite Nirvana tune. I hope that's what Robert Pattinson's listening to. And
heart-shaped glass.
By the way, he looks kind of like I said earlier, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. No, this guy looks a lot like Robert Pattinson. He looks more like Robert Pattinson.
He does, and what's really weird is maybe this is part of why they cast him. He looks a little bit like a young Neil Gaiman.
Yes, he does. And I always figured that the design of Sandman was modeled after Gaiman to some degree,
That's
right?
fair.
Like,
Well, that means I'm right that he was well cast.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. I think that when it comes to the ending, like I think I was a little let down by sort of the spectacle of the ending, and it is just kind of people like rapidly going, well, mythology wise, the rules are this, so then we can do that, and then you can CGI vortex. That stuff was a little disappointing to me because a lot of this is more literary, and it's more about like being clever and like it's less of a physical threat that's more esoteric. It is more operating on bigger stakes than just something's going to blow something up. And at the end of the day, you can call it a dream vortex. It might as well be a nuke. Like you know what I mean? Like there's not a lot there that separates it much from another end of the world scenario that I could be watching in another superhero show.
Yeah, and there's a big. I'm glad you went back to that, because this is a big complaint I have to make about that latter half, and retroactively, I guess the whole thing. And I wonder if this works better in comics or not. But we have a really typical, easy master manipulation villain plot, and I was not expecting that from this material. Where really, the Dream gets kidnapped because it's part of a big plot that his brothers do. Really, we gotta do that whole thing. Oh, okay. And like all these things that are happening with the dreaming are because of some crazy convoluted bad guy plot in the background retroactively. Okay, and we're not even told how. It's just with Desire. It's just, and the way Desire's set up is weird, where it's like Desire's at the end of an episode, it's like, I'm doing things, and then later you see Desire again, it's like, I'm doing things, and then finally you find out that Desire was behind the plot for him to get trapped in the early 1900s, and then he's behind the conception of the vortex.
I was really confused by this. So
Desire impregnated her somehow, so the vortex would happen, so that then the universe could unravel, and then Desire could take over the dreaming, I guess, was the whole thing. And it all just watches so retroactive. It doesn't feel like all roads were leading here. And we're not even told, I don't think, I've seen this one time, how Desire was involved in that first plot. Where it just seemed like a couple of guys that were trying to, like, okay, so, unless I'm misunderstanding this, again, retroactively, it seemed, I think we're told that it's like, well, I was behind that all along. But they were trying to get Death, and they failed. Yes. So you intentionally made sure that, like, tried to get them to get Death, but then get Dream, so you'd be gone for 100. Okay.
I don't get it, because here's where I'm confused about it. So the Kincaid, Unity Kincaid in the comic, she was asleep, and then a person who knew she was asleep all the time forced themselves onto her, and that caused her to become pregnant, and she had a child, and in order to kind of keep it all quiet, that family sold it off. Like, it's a physical child. They don't broach that real world element whatsoever. She just says, when I was asleep and in my dreams I had a kid. But then in the real world, she just happens to also have a daughter and now a great granddaughter.
And
that's not very well related to the audience in terms of how physically she had a child.
Especially when you have a character in that same arc that conceived in the dream world, which is unusual or has never happened before. And these are different things, but if you're not paying real close attention, it kind of sounds like they're the same thing. Because you're right, like, somehow Desire was behind her getting impregnated. Did Desire impregnate her?
Well, it sounds like he impregnated her in the dream, which I don't know how Desire can enter someone's dreams.
But even if that could happen, it would suggest that, this is so bizarre, unless we're just not understanding what's happening, it would suggest that Rose's mother is a dream or a nightmare herself. And then Rose would have to be a dream or a nightmare herself, and that's not what it is. And Dream says vortexes just happen and nobody understands why, and that's a mystery. And then you have a suggestion toward the end from the guy, from the British guy who turns out to be a place, not a person, which is fun, that it has something to do with it. I didn't fully understand this whole thing, but it has something to do with, like, it's the people create the dreams, and so it's like nature's way of reminding the dream world and the gods that that they serve humanity or something. But I don't think it's, when he explains that, I don't think it's supposed to be the vortex is a like otherworldly creature in the first place. It's just a thing that naturally happens, especially because you can pass the thing that makes her a vortex. So like she's still a person. But
but it's like
but the baby that's born that was in this, that was conceived in the dream world, is not entirely a person, which is why Dream owns it. So Rose can't be one of those. Dream would know she was, right?
I guess
he knows she's a vortex.
Can she only pass over her vortex powers to her great grandmother because the great grandmother was supposed to be a vortex? But then, like, I don't know, like that sounds a little arbitrary. Would you then be able to pass it to your mom? How about your grandma? Like, your grandma was the initial person who was born in a dream, who was also born in reality. I don't know, like it's very
that's a good
ill-defined.
Point. Yeah, so wouldn't this be bizarre if, like, she is a naturally occurring, the old woman, she's a naturally occurring vortex, and she has the heart-shaped glass, the Nirvana song, in her, right? And then she is she's like dream raped. She's impregnated in a dream, and then she gives birth to what would be a part dream or nightmare, and then her great granddaughter would also be that, but that's not why she's a vortex. But I don't think it is that. So then the only assumption we can make is that Desire got a person to impregnate her.
But doesn't Unity Kincaid say that in my dream I had a golden-eyed lover? And he's like, the only golden-eyed lover I would know of is Desire. And he's like,
this doesn't make any sense, does it?
I'm coming to de-get you. And he's like, whoop-de-whoop. But then also earlier, this is what was weird, is earlier, and this is like a scene in the comic, there's a part where Despair is talking to Desire, because I guess they're twins, and Desire's like, hey, there's a new vortex, and it's a woman. And they're like, oh, yeah. And it's like, okay, what is the significance
Why does it
of
matter
the Desire
that it's a woman?
being a woman?
What's important about... Yeah.
I don't know. And it's almost like he's surprised by
either.
the news. He's surprised by the news that there was a new vortex.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I thought the whole point is that he created a vortex. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the show did not do I don't think, a good enough job of explaining what was going on there.
What explain to me how he's behind the dream kidnapping plot?
Oh, I have no idea.
How is he behind that?
I have like less than no idea how that happened, because you're right. Like,
I'm right that they say that though, right?
They say, yeah, because it's the way, like the implication. I don't know exactly what it said, but while I was watching it, the implication seemed clear to me that while like Desire was banking on Dream getting caught so that he could create a vortex.
Yeah. He's got to get. That's what it is. See how convoluted this is. He's got to get rid of Dream in order to be able to create the vortex.
Yeah. And so I was like, I was having trouble parsing out what was happening on screen. I was like, I'm not even going to try to figure out what was happening with the kidnapping plot, because that doesn't seem to fit for me.
Also, is it Roderick? No, what's the name of the bad guy that kidnaps Dream at the beginning?
Oh, it's Roderick. Roderick Bridges.
Does because it's not 1980 whatever now, and he's in prison for like 120 years or whatever. Am I right? I don't think the timeline works out with the kid, like with his kid then having control of Dream. By the way, I'm not going to have time to talk about this, and you haven't seen it yet, so I'm not going to deal with it, but there is an interesting parallel with the 11th episode with another person that ends up kidnapping a god and passes it to another person who decides to hang on to said god. I just realized that those are parallels, and they did that on purpose.
Oh, is that Destiny?
Say it again.
Is it Destiny?
No, it's not. It's a muse. It's a writer who
Oh.
who has writer's block and needs a muse, like the Greek muses,
Mhm.
to give him story ideas. And he has an elderly mentor who also feels kind of evil for not enough of a good reason, but sort of. He's better. But anyway, he uses a muse forever and keeps her like locked up for like 60 years,
I
and
see.
then
Okay.
gives the writer the muse as a gift. And the writer's like, well, this isn't right. I shouldn't do this. But also, I have to write this book that I got an advance for 2 years ago that I haven't even started on, that was due like 9 months ago. So what do I do?
So
So
you're
he,
telling me George R. R. Martin is a character in this show?
yeah, isn't
What?
that crazy?
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, doesn't look anything like him though.
Oh, okay.
But and I like the way Dream punishes him, because he gives him what he wants, but he gives him like a million ideas that come to him all at once and turn him and make him go crazy, and it's great. But
That'll
anyway,
do it. Yeah.
anyway, so yeah, I guess I did tell you about that, but I just wanted to put a pin in that. I totally didn't realize until just now just how much of a parallel that was, because it was like passing off a god. But anyway,
But sorry, just to quickly,
yeah,
because
you're
he
fine,
is
go ahead.
because there is a point where he's talking with Death, and he's like, "Has the prodigal returned?" And they're like, "No, we haven't seen that person anywhere." Is that who they're talking about? Would be the person
No.
who's okay?
No,
Oh,
I
okay.
don't think so. I'm not sure who they were talking about, because I think they said prodigal son. I think it has to be male.
No, they said the prodigal. That's all they said.
Oh,
They,
I
they
thought
didn't
there was a
clarify.
clear. Well, anyway, I don't know what they were talking about, but it couldn't have been that.
Anyways, sorry, that was just a question I had.
Yeah,
I
she's
should have done my
kind of
homework. So
minor. No, the only setup they're doing with that, because it's a minor one-off kind of episode that really is extra. Like, you could get away with for the sake of this not watching it. If they get more seasons, it'll become important, I think, because she and Dream used to be married, and so
Okay.
that's a whole thing.
I see. Interesting.
But I won't tell you any more about it, because you got to, you might want to watch it. But anyway. So yeah, I'm just not sure if the timeline works out with Roderick's son. Like, how old would he be at the point that he dies?
I had that thought
When
too.
was he conceived? Because was it in the 20s, or was it later than the 20s?
It was 1916 is where we enter it.
Right, but
So
20. Then we jumped to like 26 for quite a while, and I think
yes.
the kid's there during that, or is he?
I'm trying. Is he like an older teenager? Is that where he like kills the bird? Is that
Yeah,
26?
I think so. Or have we jumped ahead even farther at that point? But like, if he's born in the teens, that makes him 100 years old.
Yeah, and
Unless
in the
the idea is
teens,
supposed to be that
he's not a baby. He's a kid in like 1916.
is Dream
So
somehow keeping him alive longer? Because I don't think that was a plot point.
no. Yeah, I think he's just impossibly long. That's the only really way to
Okay.
kind of make it work. Yeah.
Oh. Well, you could. Yeah, I mean, there's easier ways to do that. You could just have a longer lineage.
That's what they do with the walkers. In the comics, Unity Kincaid is just Rose's grandma, and
Yeah.
this one they solve that by just making her the great grandma.
And
So,
that's whatever. Although
yeah, it's
we're
fine,
making it more convoluted, or we're finding out that it sort of is, because it might be that there's a whole lineage of freaking dream people,
yeah,
and I don't think the show knows it.
yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm so confused. Roomsky says Charles Dance was said to be living longer because he had dream in the ball. Okay,
That
that's
is
what I
true,
was
that is
wondering,
true,
is if
that
they
is true.
said that. Well, then that's supposed to explain it, I guess.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, sorry. That's just our
Okay.
lack of paying attention.
I don't know
Thank
how
you.
old he's supposed to look then, but
I'm not sure.
It doesn't matter. It's not important.
I will say
We should
Charles
stop
Dance.
talking now. Thanks for
Very
watching,
good,
guys.
very good casting for Roderick Burgess.
Yeah, no, I thought he was good too. I mean, maybe I shouldn't have made casting my worst thing. There's just like some of the like bigger side characters I wasn't excited about their casting, but then their performances were fine. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody
No,
had
I hear you. No, I would call the casting uneven, right?
the
Like,
worst thing is actually bad men being bad because they're bad. That's the worst thing.
yeah, no, there you go. There you go. Yeah. Other than that, I think we got all the bases covered, at least that I can think of right now. I do really like Boyd Holbrook as the Corinthian.
Oh yeah, he's great.
He's really entertaining. He's an actor that I like when he shows up and stuff.
And he's menacing. He's pretty scary.
And I will say, sorry, when I said earlier, like the comedy was always a little kind of never quite hit with me. I feel like the serial convention was just prime for gallows humor, and the humor was just kind of dry, and it didn't really. I was confused by what they were trying to get at. Like, it feels like there's some humor here that they're not leaning into enough, but
that's fair. But I'm sure this is just Gaiman, but I like that whole idea, though.
It's really fun.
And it took me way too long to get it, and then I felt stupid. Because it was like, I got that they were all killers, but I just didn't put together, like, serial convention serial killers. And I should have, because, like, I also did that in my food novel, too. Like, I did it, too. I had a, there's a mention in my book of a serial killer who's literally a box of cereal that kills people. And I didn't pick up on it fast enough in the show. And I was like, that's so dumb. Me of all people. Come on. I made this joke, too.
I have the same thing where there's stuff I've written, and then it's like I'll see it appear in other stuff, and I'm like, huh. Oh!
Yeah. Anyway, it's getting late. There was a lot in this show. Thanks a lot for being patient with us, guys, and watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. We were, I think, pretty darn thorough with this, Connor.
I would say so, yeah. Thank you so much for having me on here to talk about Sandman. It was great to finally fill in at least a little bit of this blind spot.
Are you, now that we've talked about it a long time, still in the middle place, or is it easier now to do the sign flip? Like, because you at the beginning of this were like, I just don't even know what to make of the show, and now that we've kind of dissected it for 2.5 hours, have you made a decision, or are you still like, nah?
Well, the stuff I wasn't really in on, you were also generally not really in on either, and you convinced me that it was not as good as I thought it was. But then I also do kind of appreciate, like, okay, if I had to give this like a number value, it'd be like a 6, right? And like a 6 can be a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Man.
Nah, not really. Like I don't see that as a D in terms of like in school, yes.
No, I know. I agree with you. Yeah.
Doggone it.
I mean, I don't do
the update.
I don't do the 1 through 10 thing, just because I've always been on the Oda 4 scale, so I just don't tend to do it. But like if I'm doing that, it's like a 7.75 probably.
Okay. For me, 6 is like the, you know what I mean? Like it could go either way, and I think I'm still at that level. I'll say, because I'm having a good time talking about it with you, I'll go green. I'll say sure. I'm feeling it. I will watch a second season. That being said, I'm absolutely going to finish reading this series, and then I can have more ammunition to watch this show with, because I do enjoy watching this more as an experiment in terms of how they adapted it than I am compelled by the show on its own terms. So now I just said that out loud, I'm almost compelled to say I'm not feeling it.
I'm glad I got, so you're still in the same place. I'm glad I got to do both, but with watching it as adaptation and then getting to experience a story where I didn't know what was going to happen. But I'm with you. I kind of want to read the rest of the series, or at least read as much as they're going to adapt next time. At this point, I think I will also do that.
I hear you.
Well, guys,
but you know what? At the end of the day, I said I'd watch a second season, so I'm feeling it.
Yeah, it's hard not to flip green if you say that.
Yeah.
Unless it's morbid curiosity. If it's like trucks on fire, I'm watching it. You don't have to turn green. If it's like, oh no, I'm watching another season of Krypton, because holy hell, I'm not turning green on that. I still never finished that. I need to go back to that. They had like a perfect on-screen Lobo in that show. He's amazing.
See,
but he's there for no good reason.
You found the perfect button to keep me laughing. It's just Krypton, some random show that was like nobody watched.
Nobody watched it.
It had stupid good production values from what I saw about it in certain areas.
It did.
Like their Brainiac looked insanely good, and it's like everyone just, this collective consciousness just forgot about it, and then you bring it back up. I thought that's funny.
Freaking Goyer, man.
I don't know if I'm going to keep watching the Disney Plus Marvel shows, I'm going to keep watching this. I feel like that's only fair.
This was more interesting than a lot of those have been.
Yes.
you know.
Yes, yes,
But also
yes.
this has the advantage of being adapted from Gaiman.
That's true. I guess like what's a little disappointing about it is that like they brought in like a high production and high end production Neil Gaiman material, but the TV-ness of it, I feel like it does. Those elements don't elevate the TV-ness. I feel like the TV-ness does kind of drag that stuff down a little bit.
I'm sorry, I was typing things. It drags what part down?
I feel like the TV-ness of it does kind of drag down like the higher production and the Neil Gaiman material. It drags that down a little bit as opposed to the other stuff elevating it. But I feel like there are other examples where those elements would have elevated the TV kind of quality.
But otherwise, you're gonna adapt like 4 to 6 issues every 3 years.
Yeah, that's true. That's
You get it on the big screen. Anyway, well, everybody, thanks a lot for watching. I hope you had a good time. We certainly did. I'll see you again tomorrow night if you're so inclined to pop in. I'm going to do another 10 o'clock show. It's going to be another Superhero Rewind Unscripted, and I'm going to be talking about the insanity that you see behind you. I'm going to be going through my superhero movie collection. It's going to be real laid back, just showing you what I have. I don't even know how I'm going to set it up camera-wise yet, like if I'm gonna run back and forth or have a stacks of stuff here, and I don't know what I'm doing yet. I'll figure it out. But anyway, that might be 2 shows. I don't know if I can get through the whole thing in 2 hours or if it'll all be just tomorrow night. I'm flying by the seat of my pants on that. But pop in and we'll take a look at the DVDs and Blu-rays together. And in the meantime, thanks for being here. I was Captain Logan, and this was Connor Nielsen.
Bye, everybody. Sleep well.
Connor, thank you so much for doing this with me, buddy.
Thank you so much for having me and thinking about me to talk about this. This was a treat.
Absolutely. No, it was great. It was a lot of fun. See you later, folks.